Hello guys. Welcome back to another exciting Naruto What If story. Today's title, What If Naruto Crossed the Forbidden Line with Kushina, a Night Where Desire Became Destiny, Episode 1. What if one impossible decision changed the fate of the entire shinobi world? What if the bond between Naruto and Kushina went beyond the limits of time and destiny, leading to a night that rewrote history forever? In this alternate universe, hidden emotions, dangerous secrets, and unexpected consequences begin to unfold. Every choice will shape a completely different future, where love, sacrifice, and destiny collide in ways no one could have imagined. So sit back, relax, and get ready for an emotional and thrilling journey unlike any other. If you enjoy Naruto What If stories, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin episode 1. 7:25 a.m. We see Naruto and his mother, Kushina, sitting across from each other at the breakfast table. Both of them were eating the healthy breakfast she just cooked up. They exchanged a series of glances at one another as they ate some eggs. Last night a new relationship began between a mother and her son. The tension was spilling over to the morning after. "Good morning. Got to run, Minato," Naruto's father said as he grabbed a piece of toast of Naruto's plate and headed out the door. Kushina and Naruto looked back at each other as the door closed behind Minato. After hearing the car pull out of the driveway, Kushina got up and walked over to her son. Never breaking eye contact, Naruto began to pull down his Nike mesh shorts. His mother took off her PJ bottoms and then sat on his lap as they began to make out uncontrollably. Let me give you a little backstory that leads up to this moment. Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze is Naruto's mother's full name. And to give you a bit of a visual, she still looks incredibly for being 39. She has fantastic long legs, gigantic tits, nice plump motherly, beautiful full lips, and big purple eyes that you can just lose yourself in. The greatest thing about her is her commitment to keeping her body in incredible shape. She is a head trainer at the local gym and teaches spin class, yoga, Pilates, and weight training. Minato Namikaze at 40, used to work out a lot when he was young but has let himself go a bit due to his everyday work routine. Growing up, Naruto's parents made sure he was very active in sports and in his education. Naruto is in the last semester of high school and he just became the starting third baseman for the varsity baseball team. His father was so proud of him when he came home with the big news. His mother was even more ecstatic as she nearly tackled him to congratulate him. Naruto is sincerely blessed with a loving family. Since he was their only child, he gets all of their attention. "We are so proud of you," Kushina screamed as she lunged into Naruto. Her beautifully toned arms wrapped around his neck and she jumped on top of him. Her excitement caught Naruto off guard and they both fell to the ground. She began to shower him with kisses. "Mom!" Naruto grabbed her around the waist and flipped her onto her back as he rolled on top of her. He looked her in the eyes playfully and pinned her down. Kushina laughed out loud and locked eyes with her son as her gorgeous red hair fell onto her face. Naruto's dad immediately came up from behind him and headlocked him and proceeded to playfully wrestle him to the ground. Last Saturday morning, Naruto woke up early because he had baseball practice. He was up eating a bowl of cereal when he remembered that his coach told him that their game from last Wednesday would be featured in the local news. As his parents continued to sleep, he hopped on the computer to check the news site. After reading the article, he looked on the computer for his homework assignment he did the night before. That is when he came across a folder called 1990s Portfolio. His curiosity got the best of him and he opened the folder. Inside he found even more folders called JCPenney, Sears, Playboy Audition, Pinup Lingerie, Bikini Sets, etc. etc. He went through each folder and was shocked to find all these pictures of his mother in different poses and outfits. Naruto's heart was racing a mile a minute as he noticed he was getting extremely hard. He could hardly breathe as he quickly rummaged through folders. His hard-on was becoming stiffer and stiffer as he heard the stairs outside of the office beginning to creak. Someone was coming downstairs. If he was not already out of breath, he was now nearing a heart attack stage. He immediately closed all the folders and opened up the webpage he was looking at. As he closed out the last folder, he noticed a few called pictorials and glamour models gone bad. Thank God for creaking floorboards, he thought. Kushina walked in and said, "Hi honey, what are you doing so early?" She was dressed in her usual sleep attire that she wore late at night and early in the mornings. Her outfits perfectly accented her every curve. Nothing mom, just wanted to look at the article about the game, Naruto said with the world's biggest lump in his throat. Oh really? What does it say? She asked as she began to walk towards Naruto. Everything seems to slow down from there. He looked back at her after closing out the last folder. Suddenly he pictured his mother walking toward him in the green Malibu string bikini he just saw her in on the computer. It was like a cheesy 80s movie as everything around him went foggy and all focus and attention was on his mother seductively. Naruto couldn't handle or process anything at that moment. He got up and made a beeline for the door. His mind was going a mile a second as he ran past her. Okay well, I should be ready to take you to practice in about 45 minutes, she said as he ran up the stairs. Naruto ran into the bathroom, slammed the door, and turned the shower on. He quickly jerked off thinking of all those lovely pictures he saw of his very own mother. The ones that came to mind instantly were the pictures in the folder called Beach Set. Picture after picture of his mom in different string bikinis. In each picture, she had a nasty, seductive look on her face as if to say, please jump on top of me and my brains out. One in particular, she was on all four, knees together, and her perfect round plum parched way up in the air. He put his hand over his mouth as he came harder than he ever had before. That is when his obsession with his beautiful mother began. Flash forward to today and in recent weeks his addiction towards his mother was growing larger and even more obscene. He was at the dinner table finishing some homework when Kushina walked in with Minato. How was date night? Naruto asked both of them. He looked up and saw his mother wearing a very hot, very short black dress. She was visibly upset or disappointed. It was fine, Minato said, walking from the dining room into the living room. I'm going to bed, I have a long day tomorrow. He continued to say as he made his way upstairs. Everything okay? Naruto asked Kushina. Yeah, it's okay. Dad is just really stressed from work, she said as she grabbed herself a bottle of water out of the fridge. Are you sure? He said with concern. If you haven't guessed by now, they are a close family and they all can sense when something is wrong. However, even with Kushina being upset, Naruto couldn't help but look straight at her massive cleavage on display. As she sat, she gave a lovely ripple and jiggled ever so slightly. He was genuinely concerned but he couldn't help notice that a good 32E tits fit so nicely in that dress. Don't tell your father, she looked up to make sure he was gone. But we tried to have a nice night but lately, all he does is complain. Naruto immediately got lost in Kushina's purple eyes as she explained how his father had changed. This happened often lately, his mother would be telling him something and he would get tunnel vision of lust. As she went on to vent about how his father was not the same man she married 20 years ago, his was getting uncomfortably hard. He often daydreams in class about having hardcore incestual with his hot and lovely red-headed milk of a mother. Do you understand, hun? Kushina asked as Naruto was quickly snapped out of his trance. Yeah, that stinks mom. If I were him, I would treat you like the goddess you are. He said while in his mind he was panicking. What the hell did I just say out loud? Naruto stared forward trying to wrap his head around what he just subconsciously blurted out. You are so incredibly sweet. I love you so much. She said lovingly. A moment passed and he looked over to her standing by the sink. She was looking at Naruto with a lovely smirk. Naruto stared back at her with confusion on his face, acting like he didn't just refer to her as a goddess. He watched her as she leaned back against the counter and crossed her arm underneath. Still smiling, she drew her head to the right a bit. What? Naruto asked, beginning to get a bit uncomfortable. Do you think I'm beautiful? Be honest, she asked seductively. Naruto's mouth immediately started to dry up. Flashbacks of panic started creeping, afraid that he would say or do something that he would regret. He lost contact with her eyes and somehow his focus got drawn in by her slim waist and incredible lovely hips. Her mouth-watering thighs followed and they single-handedly fueled him to say, Mom, you are honestly the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Another silent pause fell over the kitchen. Naruto started eating again as he took out his phone to act like he didn't want to talk about this anymore. Thank you for listening, baby, she said as she got up and headed for the living room. Her eyes never lost contact with him. Naruto immediately felt flush in the face and realized he had to be more careful. What time do you have practice in the morning, baby? She yelled from the living room. Naruto got up and met her in the living room. She was on the couch taking off her high heels. Her short dress crept its way up her thick mommy thighs. What time, honey, do you have practice? She asked again. Naruto was standing in front of her staring at her soft tits that were nearly coming out of her dress. It was completely obvious that Naruto was staring at her flesh spilling out. She quickly looked down at her chest and realized that almost half of her tits were popping out for her son to see. She then looked up at him without making any motion to cover herself up. Honey, you seriously can't help yourself, can you? She said with a smile. What? I mean, sorry mom, but they are incredible, he said, stumbling through his answer. Kushina looked at the stairs, then looked at Naruto, then looked at her tits, and then back at her son. As Naruto stared at her, he noticed she was obviously getting a bit worked up. She took a very deliberate deep breath which caused her deep cleavage to bulge out even further. Her lovely full red lips parted and she said, Naruto, your father is right upstairs. I am sorry mom, which means we must be quiet. She cut him off as she began to take off her earrings. Naruto's 6 feet 2 inches athletic frame stood tall over her as she sat on the couch. She looked forward and noticed his hard-on beginning straining through his jeans. They both looked down at it for a moment. Then back at each other. Mom, I love you. I am sorry for looking at you like that, Naruto said. Kushina had obviously had a brief struggle to take her eyes off Naruto's bulging crotch. She then looked back up at him. You are clearly a man now. I expect you to have urges, but you cannot look at me the way you have been. Now, she paused for a second. I only see one solution to all of this. Go ahead and sit on the couch. She pointed to the adjacent love seat. Naruto sat down as she made her way towards him. Kushina then straddled Naruto on the love seat and began to completely maul his face with kisses. These were definitely not kisses that a mother normally gives her son. The force of her aggression pushed Naruto back into the couch. He grabbed her large motherly curves and held her up against him as they passionately continued. Both of their sexual aggressions exploded right there in the living room. There was no stopping this derailed train. Kushina came up, never breaking eye contact, and settled down on Naruto's lap and began kissing him again. Their tongue wrestled as she began to grind her wide hips onto his. He couldn't believe what was happening, but he for sure was making the most of it. All of the images he had of her in lovely workout outfits, elegant dresses, nighttime lingerie, all of it was being pumped into his brain at once. He grabbed the back of his mom's head, pulled her hair back, and attacked her soft neck. She let out a moan that if he were to put into words it would say, oh my god, yes. Is everything okay down there? Kushina and Naruto both stopped and stared at each other with a shocked look. Kushina, you okay? Minato yelled at the top of the stairs. If Minato would come down those stairs right now, he would see his wife of 20 years and his full-grown son in the midst of a full-on makeout session on the love seat. Mother and son continued to stare at each other and then Kushina spoke. Yes dear, Naruto and I are just cleaning under the couch. Go back to bed, she said as she quickly reached down to start unzipping Naruto's pants. Naruto couldn't believe his mom started to continue her lewd behavior. What if dad comes down? He won't, she said to him. Go back to bed, hun. You have to be up early for work, she yelled out, fumbling with his belt. Kushina expertly fished him out of his pants and nuzzled it along the front of her panties. Okay, are you coming up? Minato asked. Soon, hun. Soon, oh my. Kushina quickly answered as Naruto dove into her neck. Her perfume was intoxicating to Naruto. See, Kushina said with confidence as she began to expertly massage him up and down. The sensation was incredible. Naruto couldn't believe this was happening. Then Kushina went straight for his ear. She ed and tongued in and around his ear. He was beginning to fully grasp the sexual being that is his mother. That is when she began to talk dirty to him. All the girls Naruto have been with never liked to talk nasty during or making out. Yours is so hard. Do you like me jerking you off like this? Tell me what you want to do to me. Naruto didn't answer her at first as he concentrated on not coming right there and ending this whole scenario. I can't believe we are doing this, Kushina said in a loud whisper, almost out of breath. Did you like those pictures of your mom on the computer? She said as she bit softly on his earlobe. What? Oh mom. How? How did you know? Please baby, you ran out of the room with the biggest boner. Your face was screaming that you were looking at something you shouldn't have. Looking at dirty pictures of your mother, she hissed as she slightly started convulse. Naruto guessed that she just had a mini orgasm. He took a large and deep satisfying breath that the truth was coming out and his lovely mother was okay with all of it. Kushina then reached for her panties and pulled them aside. With her other hand, she took his throbbing heart and guided it toward her warm wet opening. Honey, I need this right now but we have to be quiet, she said almost on the brink of tears. Yes, Naruto said firmly. At that moment, he felt her moist wet engulf his large. Inch by inch she sank down onto his raging heart, her red ruby hair still done up perfectly, cleavage on display, and her dress hiked up around her waist as she began to slowly move up and down. Oh my baby. You're so big, she said in a loud lovely whisper. Kushina gave another slow deliberate pump of her hips and the next thing Naruto knew he was bottom deep in his mom's wet hot cunt. Still fully clothed besides her heels, she began to bounce on his lap. Her magnificent tits were still inside of her dress but the material didn't prevent them from bouncing obscenely with her body. Naruto didn't make any effort to take his clothes off either just in case Minato decided to wake up for a midnight snack and catch him balls deep in his hot mother's. Kushina leaned closer until they were face to face. Her eyes burning lust into her son's eyes. Naruto's eyes say use me for your pleasure. Oh God. Bunny. You feel so good. She began to work harder and harder. All of a sudden Kushina turned things up into another gear. Tell mommy how much you want her. Other than just being your loving mother who cooks and cleans for you, what else do you want from me? She said with a trembling voice. The love seat underneath them was starting to creak a little from the constant bouncing. Her beautiful red hair was rising and falling on her face and shoulders. I want you every day, Naruto said, unsure of what exactly she wanted him to say. Say it honey. Say exactly what you want me to do. It's healthy to get rid of these urges. She said as she continued. Naruto reached around Kushina and grabbed her again and lifted her whole body off of him. He put her on her back on the other side of the love seat and got between her legs. Kushina was completely surprised with his aggression but visibly turned on by his strength. He quickly guided his back into her and she let out a soft moan. He immediately put his hand over her mouth preventing her moans from getting any louder. He started her hard and fast. He knew this is exactly how she wanted and needed it. I want you to dress in skimpy clothes that I saw you wearing on the computer. You have a hot body and you need to show it off. I can't believe my mom used to be a model. Naruto said as he grabbed the neckline of her dress and pulled it under her tits. This caused her giant milky tits to pop out and bounce. Oh my God. Use me, she then looked back into his eyes with a devilish grin. You like me. You like the way mommy's grabs around your. In a dirty way, she was calling out the fact that she was his mother and it was sending the both of them into overdrive. He placed his hand over her mouth again. He was downright the shit out of her. Pounding her beautiful body into the love seat that we spent so many nights watching TV on. She pushed his hand out of the way and brought his head close to hers. Honey, I am going to come so hard. She hissed at him. Come for me mom. Come for your son, Naruto said firmly in her ear. That did it for Kushina. Her eyes filled up with lust, love, and passion and began to roll into the back of her head. Her perfect tits were wildly bouncing and rolling around on her chest. She was beginning to gush. She reached up and grabbed the back of his neck for leverage and her hips continued back at him. The love seat was really creaking now and beginning to slide. That is when Kushina began to come. Oh my goodddd. I'm cumming on you. Her body began to violently convulse for 10 to 15 seconds. Her perfect ruby red lips were slightly open and she lost control of her breathing. As if she were being punched, her hips shot up against him, her legs wrapped around Naruto's and she began grinding as hard as she could. Thump 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 thump. Naruto continued to lay into her without showing any sign of mercy. Then he decided he didn't want to break the love seat because at the pace they were going at it was inevitable. He lifted his mother once again and gently laid her down on the living rug. Honey, what are you doing? Oh my God, that was amazing. She said still out of breath. Naruto laid her down and began to thrust hard into her again. She spread her legs wide as her dress bunched up around her waist again. She grabbed at her tits and pushed those perfect globes together. Put your face right into mommy tits. You know you want to. Kushina started to get her wits about her again and decided it was time to make her son come. Naruto dove face first into her massive pushed-up tits. He began her faster and harder. The slamming of his hips into hers was causing her whole body to jump. Pound me. Pound your mommy. Thump 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 thump. Look at me, Naruto. Look at me, she said in a warm motherly tone. She grabbed his head out of her chest and made him stare right into her purple eyes. Look at me baby. On the floor of the living room. Look at you me thump 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 thump. Kushina continued to talk dirty as Naruto continued using her body to get off. Thump. Pound it. Thump. Pound that twat. Oh my god. I can't believe my incredibly lovely hot mother was using such crude language. I never imagined she would be the type to use such dirty words. Naruto thought. Oh my god mom, if you keep talking like that I am going to come so hard. He said as he attacked her neck with his tongue again. Good baby. I want you to come your brains out. Unload your heavy balls. Let mommy help you. Naruto's brain was completely and he began blabbering uncontrollably. Jesus Christ mom. For years I have wanted this. The other day you were in a red tube top and it took everything in the world not to rip that top off and the shit out of your tits. He confessed as he continued his mother faster and faster. She said as she started to convulse again. I love your big tits, your plump, everything about you. Naruto said as he felt his balls starting to tighten. I love that. Just say the word honey and I will let you use me anytime you want. Do you hear me? I don't care what we're doing or where we are. Yes mom. I can't believe how kinky you are, he said, trying not to be too loud. Naruto, look at me, she said softly. Naruto looked again deep into his mother's eyes. This time she had a soft loving and warm smile on her face. It was as if she was back to playing her normal mommy role. Naruto. Thump 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 thump. Quote. Come on my tits. Never breaking eye contact. Thump 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 thump. Naruto. Thump 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 thump. When you're ready to blow. I want you to pull out, stand up, and jack off of my tits. She instructed. Thump 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 thump. Naruto was done. Her naughty instruction would have killed off any man. I am going to come. He said as he pulled out of her incredibly wet. On mommy's tits. Unload those balls on my chest. She quickly jumped onto her knees, grabbed her tits, and presented them to him. She was so lovely and Naruto wasn't thinking that because he was on the verge of blowing the biggest load of his life. He started jacking off really fast as he stared at his mother below him. He stood proudly in front of her, ready to shoot everything he had onto those perfect tits. She looked at him with that devilishly grin, do it baby. Naruto started to take aim as he felt the first shot violently spit from the head of his shot 3 or 4 large potent ropes onto her left tit and then quickly moved over to her right. Yes sshunny. There you go. Cum for mommy. Naruto has never shot so much cum out of his before and it was all because of his insatiable mother. She single-handedly pulled the biggest load he ever produced out of him. More and more continued to rain down on her. The force of a few gooey loads shot so forcefully that it hit her on her face, landing just below her mouth. Jesus baby. It was so hot. I haven't liked that in years. She said as he started to calm down. She then began to lick the cum off her big giant tits as Naruto slumped back on the love seat and watched his amazing mother put on a show. She crawled over to him and opened her mouth to show him all of his cum. She closed her mouth after about 5 seconds and swallowed the large pool of jizz that was resting on her tongue. Naruto has never been so turned on in his life. He felt his getting hard again. Kushina noticed this and quickly got on the couch on her hands and knees. Pulling her thong to the side over her large round, she looked over to him. Baby, we can't have you going to sleep still frustrated, she said as she kept her up and lowered her upper body so her face was on the couch cushion. She looked at him with a soft, hungry look on her face. Honey, use me, please. Naruto had a feeling this would be the start of a new, wonderful relationship with his beautiful kinky mother. Where are you guys? Minato yelled. Naruto's devoted father and Kushina's loving husband were at the top of the stairs leading down into the basement. On top of the washing machine in the basement, Naruto sat comfortably. He was from the waist down and his thick 9 inches hard stuck straight up in the air. Dressed in a red baby doll nightie, Naruto's mom Kushina lifted her head from her son's lap. She looked ravishing and out of this world in the sheer net lace PJ set. For the kill, she wore a matching red thong that rode high on her wide matronly hips. The two lovers that can now comfortably act on their primal urges as soon and as often as they needed. Although sneaking around was mandatory, the juice was worth the squeeze. Naruto was enjoying every minute he had with his gorgeous former model mommy, and Kushina ached to be a devoted mother to him. She wanted to see him grow, succeed, and blossom into the young man she knew he could be. Consequently, Naruto's endless appetite and desire for it needs to be tamed or it will get him into huge trouble one day. Kushina could not let that happen. "Shit, your father is home," Kushina whispered disappointingly. She reached down and picked up her silk robe that she tossed to the ground minutes earlier. There was pre-cum around Kushina's mouth and Naruto's lap was drenched and covered in his mother's saliva. Naruto jumped off the washing machine and pulled up his gym shorts. He stuffed his iron hard rod away but it ultimately caused his shorts to tent outwards. "We are in the basement finishing up laundry," Kushina yelled as she winked at Naruto tying her robe closed. "Oh honey look. You are a mess." The beautiful mother's attention went to her son's crotch as she noticed Naruto almost ripping the front of his gray cotton shorts. In addition, the wetness from the mother's mouth left large wet stains everywhere. Thinking quickly, Kushina looked up the basement stairs and yelled, "Minato, can you check the shower in the upstairs bathroom?" Naruto said there was a problem with the water pressure. Naruto looked confusedly at his mother knowing that there was nothing wrong when he took a shower earlier. Naruto and Kushina listened as Minato's footsteps faded on his way up to the 3rd level of their house. Kushina looked back at Naruto with a lusty look on her face. "You can't go upstairs with your big one ready to explode like that, my horny little man," she said matter-of-factly as she walked towards Naruto. Her thick creamy thighs caused the black robe to part at her panty covered as she took each step forward. She really was a goddess. Kushina got on her knees in front of Naruto and looked up with her hypnotic purple eyes bearing into his soul. She sat down on her heels and stared up seductively at him. Her face expertly instructed him exactly what to do. Naruto pulled his back out and rubbed in the excess saliva that was around his crotch. Kushina didn't move and told her son to do what he needed to do to get off. Naruto stepped forward and rubbed his heart along his mother's beautiful rosy cheeks, ruby red lips, under her chin, and around to the bridge of her nose. He was in a trance and his pulse rushed an extra pint of blood to his already steel hard. His mother let him enjoy the moment for a few seconds. She smiled at him realizing that it was her that was the object of her son's desires. "Sweetie, we need to hurry. Do you think you can see mommy's face and come without making too much noise?" She finally spoke. Naruto tapped him on her right cheek, then her forehead, and then on the bridge of her nose. He was captivated by her beauty. "We don't want your father hearing your mom's sweet throat." Naruto's face became flushed and turned crimson red as he leaned forward. Kushina parted her lips around his oversized bulb. He quickly put his left hand on the back of his mom's head. His right hand stayed at the base of his aiming and guiding his thrusts. He started to pump his hips and slide his member into his mother's humid mouth. "Mom, your mouth is incredible. I don't think I can get any harder." The tall son grabbed Kushina's red hair roughly and continued humping away at her face. Spit began to drool out of her mouth and fly everywhere. Last night Kushina showed him she did not have a gag reflex which caused him to blow his load within 5 minutes. Naruto took full advantage of Kushina's outstanding gift. Kushina's angel face slammed against her son's groin over and over again. "You like that, Mom? Take it deep in your perfect throat. You are going to make me come so hard," Naruto said frantically. His hips sped up into a blur as the urgency to come began to grow and grow. He looked back down at her and placed both hands in her hair. Spit continued to fall down like a river onto her robe. Kushina realized that she would have to change before heading back upstairs. The last thing she wanted was to run into her husband with their son's milky white comb all over the front of her expensive satin robe he bought for her last Christmas. However, she quickly forgot about all of that and the urge to completely drain her son of every ounce of semen in his muscular body consumed her. She placed her hands onto the waistband of Naruto's gym shorts for leverage. God, mom can take a, Naruto thought to himself. Ooh, mom. He groaned as he felt his balls begin to quake. He did not want this to end, but his mother made it clear that stuff like this would be happening on a regular basis. I love you so much, mom. Naruto strained to get out the words without sounding like a babbling fool. Kushina sensed this, popped her head off his and said, "Sweetie bear, jerk your off in your mother's mouth." She then proceeded to open her mouth wide and stick out her long wet tongue. Kushina's body temperature was through the roof and her blood boiled with pure lust. Naruto jacked him off for a good 10 seconds while Kushina patiently waited for him to bust. Looking down at her in this position was enough to make any man melt to mush. The light from above shined down and allowed Naruto to see all the way to the back of Kushina's wet throat. A second ago, he was pounding away at that same spot and now he was taking aim to shoot his milky white goo. He placed his ballooning head on the tip of her tongue and began to shoot load after load into his mother's welcoming mouth. She remained perfectly still as he pumped and pumped. Kushina didn't spill a drop as she kept her head tilted back. She let the thick pasty comb gather in her mouth, while Naruto did his best not to collapse on top of her. She knew by letting her son act out his urges on her, it would help keep him focused on his studies and away from his sexual addiction. Although, it was no secret now that Kushina was also a very sexually aggressive woman. Kushina closed her mouth and swished the comb around in her mouth for a few seconds. She gargled his milky batter for a moment before closing up again and swallowing. God, mom, you love to show off, don't you? Oh son, you don't know the half of it. Feeling better, she said as she got up off her knees. Much later that day, Kushina was in the kitchen fixing dinner like a good wholesome mother. She had on a tight pair of gray yoga pants that was like a second skin on her toned lower body. Squats and spin contributed to Kushina's largish round, thick meaty thighs, and wonderfully sculpted calves. Passing his dad in the living, Naruto walked into the kitchen and was frozen by the sight in front of him. His heart began to race as he saw his mother bending over to grab the vegetable from the bottom of the fridge. The gray material stretched over her hips and looked like her was about to rip through the back. Her knees were locked straight, legs together, and her back arched. She got up slowly, trying not to drop anything, and turned around to place the vegetables onto the counter. She turned around to get a knife when she noticed Naruto standing at the entrance of the kitchen. Mouth wide open and legs practically mush, Naruto began to get hard. If Naruto wasn't already out of his mind, he noticed she was wearing one of his father's white cotton, wife-beater, tees. Kushina didn't have a bra on as the ribbed cotton material stretched over her tits. The wonderful E-cup globes shook heavily up and down as Naruto's presence scared her. Any other mother would have walked over and slapped their sons if she caught him openly drooling over their body, but not this angelic specimen. Kushina was obviously different and she was out to prove that to herself and to her son. "Baby, I didn't see you standing there," she giggled to herself as she immediately realized that Naruto was staring at her walking around the kitchen. "Put that tongue away, mister, or prepare to use it," she flirted playfully. The thought of her giving her son raging hard-ons during the day made her nuts with excitement. Kushina was great at reacting to her son's obvious situations. She thought for a second to herself while beginning to tremble with lust. She looked down at her boner-inducing outfit and came up with a plan on the spot. She opened the fridge and got out the brand new carton of 2% milk. She closed the door, opened the top of the milk carton, walked over to the sink, and poured the contents down the drain. Naruto stood confused, but similar to a zombie, he watched her fleshy body stroll from one end of the kitchen to the other. What was she up to? "Hun, Minato, can you come here?" Kushina yelled, acting like this exchange with her son wasn't happening. "Yes dear," Minato said, entering the kitchen. "Can you run out to the store and get us some milk? I completely spaced today and forgot to get some," she asked. "Babe, I was watching." Kushina cut him off and asked with pouty lips, "Please." "Fine. Is there anything else you need?" "Naruto?" Minato asked nicely. Naruto shook his head, trying to compose himself. Minato grabbed his keys and walked out the door. Kushina watched Minato walk out the door and back over to her adorable son. A moment passed as the mother and son looked at each other. Naruto then took the initiative, took off his pants, and walked over to his mother. Kushina smiled lovingly as she watched her son coming at her like a runaway train. Naruto grabbed at her large, in-shape birthing hips. She allowed him to explore her body as he got down on his knees and got eye level with her. The tight gray pants caused the cotton material to ride up a bit on Kushina, causing a slight camel toe. Naruto continued clawing at her thighs and grabbing handfuls of fleshy mommy butt. Kissing the sides of her hips, Naruto thought to himself that he was the reason why her lower body flared out the way it did. He forced her 5 feet 8 inches exquisite body around so that her was right in front of his face. This butt was one of the top reasons for his addiction to a woman's physique. Kushina spent almost every day at the gym but somehow still maintained the perfect amount of fat on her rump. Naruto squeezed, crawled, and licked away at her. He violently pulled down her pants down to her thighs, causing her to arch back her bubble butt into his face. Kushina reached down to adjust her pretty pink thong back into place. Kushina looked remarkably like that of Francesca Jaimes, the Spanish porn star. "Baby, you really like my body, don't you?" she said, looking over her shoulder down on him. "You have no idea how much you turn me on. I have a fetish for just about everything about you." Naruto replied feverishly. "You definitely have a great way of showing me that," Kushina quickly pointed out, arching her back even further. "That was good thinking, Mom. Getting rid of Dad like that. I know how important it is for you to get your releases out on a regular basis. If not," Kushina yelped slightly as Naruto took a bite at her meaty backside. "If not, you won't be able to concentrate on all things that can make you successful." Naruto stood up and yanked his mother's lovely pink thong down underneath her cheeks. He then stood up and slapped his giant heart on her, along her thighs and hips. Then without any notices, Naruto slid inside of his mother's hot steaming from behind. Due to her son's aggression, Kushina quickly grabbed onto the kitchen counter. She loved her son ravaging her body like this. Chills ran from the top of her head down to every single one of her toes. Naruto immediately started banging the shit out of her. His right hand tightly gripped her right hip and his left hand applied pressure to the small of her back, causing her to arch her back more. Naruto looked down and saw 2 cute dimples where her amazing round butt met her lower back. The flesh of her lower body rippled due to his hard slams. Naruto's full balls smacked against the lacy thong that was just below her. Naruto hated when she used to call him Pookie when he was a kid, but in this situation, it allowed him to reach a new height of lust. Naruto his mother for several minutes and then Kushina's big purple eyes began to roll back into her head. Her perfect full lips parted but no noise came out but animalist grunts. About 30 seconds later, she gathered the strength to form a sentence to announce what he was doing to her. "Oh my god Pookie, I am going to come hard," she admitted as she began to breathe even harder. "Come for me mommy. You're such a whore parading around in these skimpy little outfits. I will wear them for you baby. I know what it does and I feel so lovely showing myself off to you." Oh. Her body exploded again. Her body shook and convulsed. Naruto's young muscular body allowed him to power on like a steam engine. The kitchen filled with sounds of skin slapping, groans, and words no mother and son should say to one another. Naruto took him out of his mother's wet cunt, spun her around, and removed her pants and her super thin pink thong. His hard-on shot up high with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Kushina hungrily looked at her son's athletic body as she continued to tremble from mini-orgasmic tremors. Her hair, messy and disheveled, fell over her face. Feeling completely in control, Naruto picked up her soaked pink thong panties and placed them on her head. He stretched and arranged them so the crotch portion was right over her mouth. He delicately pushed Kushina back against the door to the pantry, kicked open her legs slightly, and slid right back into her. While her cute bare feet remained planted on the floor, Naruto was like a madman. He stared at her panty-covered face while her back slammed against the wooden door. The thick musky smell of her was on the panties and was causing them both to drool. Naruto's mouth hung open at the sight of his mother like this. Kushina remained silent for a few minutes while she became lost in her sexual desire. Naruto then lifted her up, hooked her legs under his massive arms, and stood her up. She bounced up and down like a rag doll. Ah, I'm cummmming su har rrrdddd, Kushina yelled through the crotch of her panties. She aggressively removed the pink panties off her head to kiss her strong son deeply. Seconds later, Naruto was on top of his mother on his queen-size mattress. She still had on her wife-beater t-shirt as Naruto nailed her with hard-hitting thrusts. Her chest bounced wildly as the material of the shirt tucked itself underneath her tits. Naruto's hands grabbed at her large motherly tits and used them as leverage to hard. "Screw your mother, baby. Break your bed," she yelled at the top of her lungs. Making his mother come was all he could think about. Naruto closed his eyes and began to have many flashbacks of vacations, Christmas mornings, and other family outings throughout the years. Ones specifically where it was him and his mother. Ones with her bending over in little cotton boy shorts to pick up gifts under the Christmas tree. Ones where she would be sunbathing on the beach while him and his father played catch. Kushina screamed as she was starting to come hard again. Her voice woke Naruto up from his temporary fog as he was still plowing away at a crazy tempo. "I need to come, Mom," Naruto announced, grabbing her by the throat with one hand for support. Kushina looked down at her tits rolling around in her shirt as Naruto propped himself high above her. Her eyes went wide watching her Adonis-like son masterfully gave her pleasure she has never felt before. Never losing rhythm, he continued to slam his amazing body. Her beautiful long legs spread out wide and her full red hair sprawled out around his pillow. The veins in Naruto's neck began to pop as he bottomed out in her cunt and expertly started grinding hard and fast. This caused his mother to pop hard once again. "Ah, you're making me come again," she yelled and shook. After coming down slightly from the intense pleasure her son was giving her, Kushina reached down and grabbed the collar portion of the wife-beater t-shirt. With all the might left in her body, she ripped the tight t-shirt down the center, causing her big beautiful E-cups tits to be released. "Look at my tits and come, honey. Give me everything. Use me to empty your nuts. Empty them inside of me. Mommy's body is yours. Do what your mother tells you to do," she demanded. This caused Naruto's balls to rocket up and release its contents. Naruto dove into her sweaty, heaving chest, and edged hard on her nipples as he exploded. While coming hard, his eyes went wide and lifted up off of her. Kushina wrapped her arms around his neck, keeping her body close to him. He instinctively grabbed his mother under her bubble butt, making sure he stayed inside her as deep as possible. Naruto lifted her into a cradle position and started to convulse. While sitting on his heels and his mother on his lap, Naruto shot rope after rope inside his loving mother. They both crashed back down onto the bed as their orgasm began to fade. The incestuous couple laid there for a few minutes. Kushina turned over and began kissing Naruto softly around his face and wiping the sweat off his forehead. "That was amazing, Naruto." She inhaled deeply, still recovering from the intense heat. "I guess I am going to buy your father more wife beaters. Your father should be home very soon. Let's get cleaned up." All of a sudden Kushina popped out of bed and began to walk out. Naruto was amazed at his mother's stamina and energy. Being a full-time professional fitness instructor didn't hurt in that department. The next few days Kushina and Naruto were attached at the hip. Naruto had a baseball game after school the following Tuesday. Kushina's brand new black Ford Edge was parked at the baseball field where her son played high school varsity baseball. Naruto's team won by 1 run and he had a few great plays out on the field. It was 7:45 p.m. and everyone in the park had gone home after the big win. "You did so great today, my baby boy," Kushina said proudly as she slammed her body up and down Naruto's large erect in the back seat of her SUV. She was wearing a loose yellow sundress that she held up around her waist. Her cute feet were planted next to Naruto's hips and her hands were locked at the fingers around the back of his neck. Her white mini V-string panties were bunched up in his right hand. "Thanks, Mom. I have been really focused lately thanks to you," Naruto said through half-closed eyes, consumed by pleasure from his mother's cunt. Kushina's stacked motherly body rhythmically bounced on her son's lap, causing her body to shake as her fat meat met his lap. The pants of his baseball uniform were down between his ankles. More importantly, "And how did you do in school today? Did you hand in that term paper you were working on?" she asked, not to miss a beat. "Yep. Oh, I forgot to mention, I met up with Mrs. Bellick and she said over the last few weeks." Naruto gulped hard and stumbled a bit due to his mother's hard steady pounding. She said that my grades are improving. I am at AB+ now. She's helping me apply for some colleges. That's great. Look at you. My Pookie is becoming such a responsible young man. Kushina said joyfully. Naruto's good news made her speed up her bouncing a bit, which caused his mouth to open. This continued for a few more minutes as the SUV rocked and swayed. Naruto's eyes became hazy as Kushina continued the conversation as if they were at the dinner table with Minato. Her beautiful thick full red hair bounced with her body. Up and down, up and down. She was using the cushions of the back seat to rocket herself back up, and when she felt herself reach the very tip of his steel hard, she slammed her cunt back down to the root. When is your next game? She asked as she caressed Naruto's cheek. Pound, pound, pound. Next Tuesday, he said, breathing hard. Slam, slam, slam. Do you have practice every day? Pound, pound, pound. Yeah. Slam, slam, slam. Are you up for going shopping at the mall this weekend? I have to pick up some things. Naruto didn't say anything and clenched her soft panties in her hand. Her tight maturity made him delirious with excitement. When you get home tonight, I want you to clean your room after supper, or I am not going to bake chocolate chip cookies for you like you wanted. Only good boys. Oh God, Mom, I am going to come. Naruto cut his mother off loudly. Oh okay baby. Kushina slammed down one last time and began to violently grind on her son's lap. Naruto, grab mommy's big and come up my twat. She demanded loudly. The timing of her flipping switch and talking nasty helped him pop off extremely hard. Naruto released her panties out of his hand, reached around, and grabbed handfuls of his mother's bubbly cheeks. He shot strong strands of jizz upwards into her as she grinded back and forth. Kushina leaned in and put her forehead on his. At the same time, she grabbed onto the back of the seat and used it to forcefully her son through his orgasm. Naruto slammed his eyes closed as he let his aggressive mother milk him of everything he had. That's a great baby. Let it all out for mommy. Shoot deep into me. She said softly into his ear as her grinding began to slow down. She looked into his eyes with a comforting smile. He started to come back around and began to get his breathing under control. After about a minute of heavy French kissing, Kushina lifted herself off of her son's, deflating her cell phone began to ring in the center console. I am sure that is your father, wanting to know where we are. Kushina said with disappointment in her voice. Throughout the week, Naruto and his mother continued their horny escapades. They often were forced to come up with new creative ways to hide their relationship from everyone around them. This seemed to heighten the entire taboo experience. A few nights later, Naruto, Minato, and Kushina were all out on the back patio for a late-night snack. Kushina was just enjoying a glass of wine after a long day of work. The glass of wine must have had its effect because she was feeling particularly horny. She looked at her son like he was a piece of meat as he laid on the cushioned outdoor furniture talking with her father. Naruto was shirtless with long thin Nike sweatpants on while chatting with his father. Kushina's blood was boiling but she needed to control herself. Naruto, so what do you want for your birthday? It is next week, you know. Kushina asked, interrupting their conversation. She craved her son's undivided attention. What more could a son want more for his birthday than his mother to fulfill every single one of his desires? The family chatted for a few minutes longer and then Naruto's father announced he was going to sleep. Kushina never broke eye contact with her son as they said their goodnights. The mother and son couple sat next to each other on the outdoor couch. Dressed in a low-cut black satin charmeuse chemise nightgown, her long beautiful legs draped over his lap. Naruto was rubbing his mom's cute lovely feet. Hi, Kushina said lovingly as she adjusted her head to rest it on the back of the couch. Hi Mom, your foot rubs are the greatest baby. Mom, do you think you'll have any more kids with Dad? Kushina felt it was a weird question coming from her son. Even more so because they have been each other's brains out for the best part of the last 2 weeks. I don't know. I don't think so. Your father and I always said we just wanted one kid, but lately. You aren't that old. What? You're only 49, right? He said jokingly. Shut up, you devil. She hit him playfully in his ribs and her right foot. You would look so incredibly hot. He said, rubbing her smooth calves. Don't tell me you have a pregnancy fetish. I don't. I just think I have a fetish for you. I would love to see you have that pregnant glow. Besides, your tits would balloon. Naruto started rubbing higher up her leg. He then lifted her lovely foot to his mouth and began worshipping it. Kissing her foot on the sole, around her toes, and all around the top. That is true. Well, I am still young enough to have more babies, but then my attention would be diverted. You don't want that, do you? Naruto's MILF of a mother asked as she moved her hand on the large bulge in the front of his pants. A few minutes later Naruto was between his mother's legs on an outdoor couch. He has his face buried in her wet mature, licking away at her sensitivity. Naruto used his hands to spread her legs wide. Yes honey. Right there, she whimpered through her hands trying not to scream in ecstasy. Her whole body was shaking. He quickly rubbed her, causing the 38-year-old to squirt. She grabbed a throw pillow and used it to muffle her screams. I need you as hard as you can, sweetie. Oh god. Kushina cried as Naruto's tongue went overboard. Naruto was inside her in a flash. She bit her lip as her son her cunt with everything he had. She quickly had another intense earth-shattering orgasm. Do you like me? Tell me. Mommy. I love being inside of you. You are so warm. How about earlier? I love that you let me bang you before one of my finals. That was so dirty. Earlier this morning, Kushina dressed in a short denim mini skirt and a tight crop top. She decided to let her son relieve some anxiety before he was to take one of the final tests of the school year. Before leaving the house, the horny minx purposely laid down the back seat of her SUV. Kushina pulled into a parking spot on school grounds and got in the back with her son. Knowing he would be tense and stressed, Kushina hiked up her skirt and allowed her son to nail her right before his 8 a.m. final exam. Naruto was so lucky to have a mother that would help him get sorted out properly before a big day. Fully clothed and on her back, she spread her legs out so that her feet were touching each side of the SUV interior. He buried his face into her soft neck and plowed hard. Come on sweetie, have a quickie with mommy. Let that stress out. Concentrate on how juicy my tight cunt is. While egging on her son to blast her womb full of batter, she grabbed onto his and pushed him to her harder. Naruto's girthy pull moved in and out of her at lightning speed. As he reared back to shoot his stress into her, she whispered elegantly, "Shoot it deep, young man. I want to walk around packed full of your sperm all day." Naruto yelled as he ejaculated heavy shots of cum deep into her perfect. Back to the patio. Naruto dove down to starting and licking on her deep exposed cleavage when Kushina playfully slapped him in the face. Mommy's bad young man. You shouldn't talk to your mother like that. She said. You are my mother. How should sons talk to their whores then? Naruto asked as he slowed down his thrusting to more slow deliberate pumping. Well baby. For starters they definitively shouldn't comment on how much they want to tit their mommy. Especially right to her face. She answered back with a deep lovely tone. And a son should never give his mother mind-bending orgasms. She said to maintain eye contact. Naruto was so turned on. He stared at her beautiful facial features and listened to her dirty talk. And sons definitely should not make their mothers eat their gooey comb loads, she said as she began to lick and claw at the sensitive parts of his neck. They both were amazed and thankful that the couch was a really expensive piece of outdoor set and never creaked once. This went on for another 5 minutes until Naruto finally spoke up. Mom, I have you and that is all I want for my birthday. It is all I ever want for now on. Tears welded up in her stunning eyes and began to trickle down her smooth cheeks. You have a way with words, don't you? I love you so much. She said as her hands traveled down to his hips. She wrapped her beautiful milky motherly legs around him and grasped his tighter with her. He reached up under her arms, grabbed the back of her shoulders and began to use them to pound harder into her. However, I think you are going to be blown away with what mommy has planned for you. Her voice shook as her body rocked back and forth underneath him. Oh yeah, what is it? He said half listening. You know I can't tell you that. You'll just have to wait until next week. For now, I want you to focus on mommy hard and fast and let me know when you are ready to come. You understand? She said as she brought up her hands to his face and leaned in for a naughty incestuous kiss. A kiss so deep that both Kushina and Naruto's faces began to become red hot with passion. Naruto drilled his mom into the furniture harder as he got ready to announce the inevitable. Curiosity made him want to finish up a bit quicker than he was anticipating. Mom, I am going to come right now, he said with a sense of urgency. His mother then pushed him off and rolled off the couch. Kushina grabbed the empty wine glass that was on the oak coffee table and presented it to her son. Naruto shot up into a sitting position on his heels with his large pulsating sticking straight up in the air. He immediately knew what his mother wanted him to do. Soaking with his mother's juice on his, he grabbed it and began stroking hard. Delirious with excitement, he took aim at the top of the wine glass. Naruto's nuts constricted and he shot 6 very large shots of cum into the glass. He jerked out smaller wads to add to the thick pool of cum collecting at the bottom. Kushina watched closely as Naruto jerked himself to completion, her mouth watering with anticipation to show her son how naughty she really can be. He slumped back down onto the couch. Naruto honey, what do you want mommy to do with all this yummy semen? She asked innocently in her best young girl voice. Kushina proceeded to swirl the cum in the bottom of the glass. She then leaned back a bit and started to slowly pour the creamy content on her deep exposed cleavage. She moved lower to drop some more on down the front of her black satin nightgown. Naruto looked wide-eyed as she began to run the cum into her chest. She was drenched. When she was done, she leaned forward and ed delicately on just the tip of his big head, making sure she got everything. Wow honey, that was a lot. How do I look? She winked at him as she grabbed the glass and licked around the edge of the glass. Kushina and Naruto hugged each other tightly and they exchanged a few kisses. She playfully messed his hair up as she began to stand up. Adjusting her tits in the stained satin undergarment, she giggled to herself. She thought about how she loved how he made her feel young again. Her growing attraction to him brought thoughts and desires she had never felt before. None of her past boyfriends or even her husband had the effect on her to be such a nasty woman sexually. She looked over to her growing boy putting on his socks and her heart skipped a beat. His ripped abs shined perfectly from the patio light. Minato isn't a bad guy, but he just doesn't do it for me anymore, she thought to herself, exhaling slightly. Thanks mom, I have to finish up some homework before I hit the hay. Naruto leaned forward for one last kiss and headed upstairs. Kushina stayed in the backyard to clean up. Her body is still tingling from her latest romp with her son. Kushina had the perfect idea of what to get him for his birthday. She wondered if any of the other moms from Naruto's baseball team were their sons after practice. Or if they allow their boys to use their tits as motivation to be better in school. Or perhaps, if any of the older women in her spin class gave their growing sons filthy dirty handjobs while their husbands were in the shower. Or if they at least fantasized about it. The thought was so taboo that even if they did, they wouldn't admit to it. Over the course of the next few hours, Kushina seriously analyzed her relationship with her son Naruto. She just knew that there was no going back to a life that didn't involve her son. His happiness was her happiness. She wanted to reward and guide him like every good mother should. Ironically, while trying to help her son control his overactive libido, hers flared up to new levels. The end, but just getting started. On Saturday morning, Minato decided he would get a jump on cutting the grass in the backyard. He fired up the riding mower and set forth. Typically, it would take about an hour or two to cut the entire back lawn. Minato looked up at the window of Naruto's room on the second level. He was going to run up to his son's room and ask Naruto if he would like to help him around the yard, but decided to let him sleep in. Minato thought to himself that he was so proud of Naruto busting him in school, kicking his grades up, and ultimately getting accepted into a great college. Minato continued riding the mower as he passed just underneath Naruto's window. Slam, 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 slam. So you like to shoot your ball juice all over my thong panties, huh? Kushina said sternly. Kushina was on top of her son Naruto, him hard and fast in her son's twin-size bed. The mattress and box spring whined and shook loudly. Knowing that the sounds of riding mowers outside would drown out their hot incestuous, the kinky mother and son knew they could be as loud as they wanted. Also, they could listen in case Minato decided to come back inside. Kushina kept on her short pink satin robe, half-shelf white bra, and a pair of white crotchless lacy panties. The belt of the thin robe was still tied together, but the robe itself parted down the middle, allowing Naruto access to his mother's perfect body. Kushina knew that her choice of undergarments, nighties, and dirty talk triggered a lustful aggression in her son. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. You were walking around the house in them and you looked so lovely. A few minutes earlier, Kushina stormed into Naruto's room because she found a pair of her pink panties in the laundry. The tiny G-string thong was crusty and completely ruined. Naruto quickly realized that his mother finding her panties used and abused did not piss her off, but rather, it made her incredibly horny. Never be sorry, sweetie. But I wish you would have let me know. I would have loved to watch you jack your big boner off all over them. Or on me for that matter. But you have to be careful that your father doesn't find stuff like this. Kushina said matter-of-factly. Naruto did everything in his power not to come right then and there. Tell me, baby, what else turns you on? Kushina said as she leaned closer to his face. Her hips and bouncing, not letting up. Another time, during Easter, you wore your long-sleeve lace nightie and put on a pair of lovely bunny ears. The gown fit so tight around her perfect curves, Mom. I jacked off 3 times that night to think of you. You shouldn't be looking at your mother like that. Did you imagine me as your little bunny? Kushina said while bouncing her body a bit faster. Yes, I did. God. Mom, I love how hard you are. Naruto said, shutting his eyes tight. Naruto couldn't get over the fact that his incredible mother looked so hot and lovely, like a glamour and Playboy model. Second, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze looked exactly like a goddess. This isn't anything, hun. You like mommy taking care of your morning boners like this. She tightened her muscles and bounced hard on her growing boy. Her soaking wet cunt slammed up and down. Next, Naruto watched his 38-year-old mother stuff the disgusting soiled pair of panties into her mouth. At that point, Kushina slipped her hands behind Naruto's neck and locked her hands together for extra leverage. The pleasure was making him forget his own name at the moment. He thought the headboard behind him was going to crack the wall. The hard and dirty talk went on for several minutes. I couldn't help it, but I jacked off into one of your large lovely bras a few days ago too. Naruto said as he reached to feel up his stacked mother's heavy tits. He parted the robe a bit more and untucked her tits from inside the bra. The black transparent sheer one. I know. It was so obvious. The stains were all over the place. It was enough to think that 3 or 4 guys jacked off in it at once. She said after taking the panties out of her mouth and playfully throwing it at her son's face. Did you wear it after? Naruto asked while slightly grunting from his mother's hard pounding. Oh yeah, I did grocery shopping later on in my fresh new cum-stained bra. Kushina answered seductively. You're so dirty, Mom. I never thought you would be this wild. What else do you like? I sometimes like to be called filthy names. I think it's because I have been having such boring vanilla for years now. It seems lately I've been needing a hard on me every day. Kushina confessed. You like being called a lovely bitch. Yes. Kushina hissed loudly. How about if we are out at a movie and I whisper to you that I want you to bury me down your tight throat? Mommy is your little tramp, she whispered as she felt her entire body beginning to heat up. Kushina's juice was gushing down Naruto's cum-filled balls. Can I use your whore whenever I want? Naruto continued to molest her heavy tits as they hung out of her silky robe. God yes. You're making me so wet. I wish Dad would have gone to work today. I would spend the day turning your balls inside out. Kushina confessed as she felt almost every hair follicle on her body begin to rise. Look at me, Mom. Kushina looked down at him with her soft doe eyes. Her body was on the verge of an earth-shaking orgasm. She continued to bounce hard and fast on her baby boy, slamming her slick from the root to the tip of his large. You are about to make me pop. Jack my with that perfect juicy mommy hole. That did it. Out of pure animalistic lust, Kushina slapped Naruto hard across his face as she exploded. Her face went blood red and her body went into overdrive. Ah, you bad boy. I'm cummingg hard. Kushina cried out and exploded. Letting out a deep moan, she let the orgasm take control of her body. She felt every nerve-ending tingle as her body continued to shake violently. The bed shook in unison with her trembling body. Minato whistled to himself as he rode the John Deere mower and drove under Naruto's window again. The loud engine drowned out Kushina's deep primal scream. Naruto hung on for dear life as his mother continued to beat the hell out of her manly son. Naruto couldn't hold his load much longer. His nuts tightened and his head ballooned. He reached under the back of her short robe and grabbed a handful of her big meaty gloves. Still shaking and hard, Kushina glanced out the window at Minato, who was working on the lawn. She noticed him getting off the mower and began to make his way towards the back patio. Shit, your father is coming in. Blow your nuts right now, young man. Blast your thick cream inside my wet hot cunt. Kushina the breath right out of his lungs as his balls exploded hard. Up mommy's twat. Up my twat. Up my twat. Kushina cried loudly and bared down roughly. She hit her son as hard as she could as Naruto shot rope after rope of gooey cum deep inside her. Naruto was seeing stars as he buried his face inside Kushina's warm sweaty cleavage and grabbed her hard. The horny mommy held her son close and gave him soft kisses on top of his head. Later that morning, Naruto was cleaning up the family room. Kushina walked in with her yoga mat and a pair of Bluetooth headphones. She was dressed in tight black leggings and a yellow workout bra. It was time for Kushina's full-hour yoga session. Whether at the gym or at home, every Saturday Kushina would do yoga from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Naruto continued to straight up and work around her. He couldn't keep his eyes off his beautiful and lovely mother as she stretched in different poses. Naruto resisted grabbing his mother and her right on the floor. For the next hour, Naruto came in and out of the family room. He made sure when his father was in the room, he would not stare at her bending and stretching. But Kushina knew full well that her son was a horny pervert and she loved him for that. As soon as Kushina was finished with her workout, Naruto took his mother by the hand and brought her to the living room. All the blood in Naruto's body was pouring into his large heart. Kushina knew he would be frustrated watching her for a full hour and made no attempts to stop her son's aggressive behavior. In fact, she was still convinced she needed to do this for him to help keep his addictions at bay. Naruto quickly bent his mother at the waist, over the sectional couch. He violently pulled down her tight black lycra leggings halfway down her thighs, and lined up his erect with her welcoming cunt. Naruto grabbed the back of the yellow thong panties and hooked it over her left cheek. The living room window looked out into the front lawn where Minato was fixing a sprinkler head. Naruto purposely had his mother face toward the window so that she could watch out for his father. The extremely horny son sunk into his mother as deep as he could go and began banging away at her from behind. Naruto stared down at her meat as it rippled every time it slammed against his groin. His mouth instantly began to water as he continued to pound away. I'll be quick, you have me so turned on. Look out the window in case dad comes in. Kushina didn't say anything as she kept her eyes on Naruto's father through the window. She never felt more alive as she let her son do what needed to be done to get off. To the 38-year-old mother, it was an incredible feeling to be needed with such lust and love. Kushina noticed Minato beginning to walk towards the front door. Your father! Kushina yelled out. Naruto quickly slipped out of his mother's juice and his hard snapped up, hitting his stomach. Kushina grabbed at her tight leggings and pulled them up over her plump booty. The two flopped on the couch and composed themselves right as Minato came through the door. All done with your yoga, honey? Minato said as he grabbed a few tools that were on the living room floor. Yep, Kushina said while fumbling with the remote, trying to turn the TV on. Naruto grabbed his phone and pretended to check Facebook. You both look out of breath. Were you showing our boy some new exercises? Minato asked as he headed back toward the front door. Yeah, we just got done. It was this lower body workout, but it's great cardio. Naruto said with half a smirk looking down at his phone. Okay, well, go easy with your poor mother. She's getting fragile in her old age. Minato winked at Kushina and walked outside. Naruto smiled to himself realizing that she obviously was not putting the same effort into her own husband as she does with him. A few minutes later, Naruto resumed his mother doggy style while Kushina continued to look out the living room window. The incestuous mother and son were so turned on, but they knew they needed to be quick. Naruto grabbed his mother by the shoulders and stood her up straight. This made her arch her back as he went on nailing her from behind. He reached in front of her yellow sports bra and pushed the material just over her big full natural tits. Mom, are you on the pill? You're not going to get pregnant, are you? Naruto asked. Why, baby? The sight of your mother knocking up and carrying your baby wouldn't excite you. Kushina purred. Naruto let out a lustful moan and grabbed her all over her hourglass figure. I am so fertile right now, son. I remember how big my tits got when I was pregnant with you. Kushina moaned while slamming her back to meet Naruto's thrusts. Kushina remembered that she had not missed taking her birth control pill in years, but her son didn't know that. She loved how hard he got at the thought of a baby into her. "Mom, tell me to come in you," he whispered as he grabbed her soft and heavy. "Honey." Kushina looked over her shoulder and stared lovingly back at him. "Come baby. Empty yourself in your personal cum catcher. Do it Naruto," she said softly. "Again mom. Please," Naruto said as he picked up the pace of his deep thrusting. "Be a good boy and release that yummy sperm," Kushina whispered while feeling completely ravished by her son's hard pounding and roaming hands. She couldn't believe that he would take a chance in knocking her up. Even though the chances were slim to none, it excited her to no end that her son was not afraid of her getting pregnant. "Oh God mom," louder. Naruto spanked his mother hard on her bubble butt. His face became extremely flush. Their skin smacking against each other echo in the living room. "Baby, aim for my uterus and make a big gooey mess in your mother," Kushina said with more authority. Naruto squeezed his mother's hips and slammed him into her as hard as he could. Kushina looked back outside to monitor her husband's movements while her son used her like a ragdoll. Seconds later, she felt her son's cum fill all around his pounding. She was being flooded and the feeling made Kushina's eyes roll into the back of her head. She felt her body explode and they both collapsed onto the couch. The next day, Kushina dragged Naruto to the outlets on the other side of town. They acted like a typical mother and son while out in public. They went from store to store and Kushina made him buy new clothes for their upcoming summer vacation. Kushina dragged her son into an everything but water department store that specialized in women's bathing suits. Besides Naruto's birthday coming up, the idea of going away for a week excited her even more. Since she worked incredibly hard to stay in shape and healthy, Kushina wanted to buy something a bit more revealing than what she normally tends to wear. The bikinis and two pieces on display were kind of modest for what she was looking for. Naruto walked around the store bored out of his mind while playing games on his iPhone. Wanting to keep her son's attention, Kushina began to think of dirty ways she could tease him. She quickly grabbed a bathing suit off the rack and went to the dressing room. This bathing suit turned out to be 2 sizes too small. Entering the dressing room, Kushina took off her tight top and unhooked her bra. Her mouth-watering tits hung freely. They bounced and swayed as she reached down to pick up her cell phone. She began taking pictures of herself changing and sent them to her son who was clearly bored. Dropping her pants, she turned around and bent over in the mirror. She took a selfie in the mirror of her full backside knowing this would get Naruto going. Naruto began receiving the messages and his jaw dropped. One by one the images rolled in. One picture was of Naruto's beautiful adoring mother with her right arm underneath both her gorgeous heavy tits, pushing them together and upwards. The text in the message said, "Maybe we can play target practice later." In another photo, she was on the changing bench with her legs spread. She snapped a close-up of her perfect lips with 2 of her fingers buried deep inside of her. He was becoming noticeably uncomfortable as he began to grow in his jeans. Naruto and Kushina flirted heavily while they shopped and spent the day together. Naruto was visibly going crazy and Kushina was creaming her panties. They made their way up to the second level of the outlet mall. Kushina purposely stepped first onto the escalator. Naruto became eye level with what he considered was the most perfect hips in the world. Kushina climbed 2 steps in front of Naruto and popped her meaty butt backwards. Then, she grabbed at her thong panties in her jeans and hiked them high on her hips. Naruto's tongue hung out of his mouth as his mother gave herself a whale tail. Her son almost blew a load right there on the escalator. Naruto reached out and smacked his mother's perfect backside for being such a naughty girl. About 15 minutes later, Kushina and Naruto were in the Nike store to find some new workout clothes. The loving mother looked over to her son as he flipped through some of the racks. There were times where she just couldn't believe how handsome her young man had become. Getting flush and warm, she started walking over to him. "Come with me." Kushina grabbed Naruto's bulky arm and led him out of the store. "Where are we going, Mom?" Naruto asked confusingly. Kushina led her son around the corner of the elevator. Perfectly out of sight from the mall traffic, Kushina leaned in and gave her son a soft, sensual kiss. "I love you so much," Kushina said as she dropped her bags. Her body weight pushed Naruto up against the wall as she put her arms on his broad chest. They kissed deeply for several minutes as Naruto held his mother close. Kushina broke the kiss and the two stared at each other for a moment. Naruto then lifted his mother up off her feet. Kushina instinctively hooked her legs around him as her son held her up while Naruto spun around and put his mother against the wall. He then began kissing her neck. "Mom, you are so hot," Naruto said as he gushed over his stacked mom. "You are so strong. I adore the way you hold me. I never felt so, you make me feel so needed. Tell me that you need me the way I need you, baby." Kushina said as she lovingly stared into his eyes. "You are everything to me, Mom," her son quickly answered back. After they got done shopping, the two decided to pull over into a scenic park overlooking the small quiet town they lived in. Naruto found a spot at the top of the hill where they can watch the sunset. Kushina was lying on her stomach on a big soft blanket. Her tight jeans were piled next to Naruto's cargo shorts on the side of them. Kushina's blue mini G-string thong that she was wearing earlier was now ripped to shreds and laying in the grass somewhere. Naruto was breathing pretty hard as he nailed his mom in a prone bone position. Kushina's top was still on as Naruto humped away at her luscious backside. His large athletic legs were on either side of his mother's wide hips and he had his face buried in the back of her neck. Her perfume had a hypnotizing effect on Naruto. "Come on, son, show me that I shouldn't tease you the way I did today. Show me why I shouldn't do naughty things like that." Her voice trembled from the hard pounding she was receiving. "I wanted to do this to you right in the middle of the store," he said as he continued to plow away at her from behind. He suddenly pulled out and jammed his thumb between her cheeks. He started rubbing his head up and down her full cheeks. Lodging his shaft in her butt crack, he grabbed the sides of her meaty hips so that her cheeks engulfed his hard member. Naruto moved back and forth and used her perfect lobes to jerk himself off. "Oh, use those cheeks, baby. You like your mother's thick butt." "Yes, Mom. You are so amazing. I could stare at it all day," he said as he bent down and playfully bit and kissed the beautiful flesh of upper hamstrings and lower back. Still slick with Kushina's juice, he rubbed his steel deep in her cleavage for a few more minutes. Then he flipped her around onto her back. Kushina shut her legs and brought her knees to her chest. Her flexibility was astounding to Naruto. He rammed his insanely hard back into his mother's tight twat. "Oh baby, did your mommy make you all hard and horny while shopping today?" Kushina said teasingly, loving the fact that she made her son incredibly hard. "Did you get turned on seeing mommy bend over? Could you see my pretty new thong poking out? You know, the ones you just tore off of me." Naruto's mother knew exactly the type of naughty things he thought about when it came to her body and the skimpy clothes she wore. Naruto his mother faster and faster, trying desperately to pound Kushina into the ground. "I can't believe you wanted to commit incest with your own mother in that dressing room. I supposed you want to watch me walk around the house in clothes. Maybe a pair of tight fishnet body stockings. Then I guess you would throw me down and screw me right on the floor of the family room. You adorable pervert, how dare you want your mother in her revealing lingerie," she said loudly, staring up at her handsome baby boy. Her filthy mouth turned her on just as much as her son. Naruto was nearly speechless as he focused on pounding her sweet juicy cunt. Kushina wrapped her strong arms around Naruto and aggressively rolled him over. Now on his back, Naruto's curvy mother began riding him. She grinded slowly at first as shivers ran up and down her spine. Kushina seductively took her shirt off but kept on her sheer half-shelf bra. The underlining provided the perfect amount of lift and kept her tits from bouncing out of control. However, the tops of her round ballooned upwards and were spilling out of the top of the bra. Kushina laid down on her son's manly chest so that it was just about nose to nose. Her eyes burned lovingly into his. Her hips and started to pump away at his rock-hard shaft at an unbelievable pace. "You're my darling baby boy. You're going up so fast. It seems like yesterday you were my little boy. Now you are mommy's perfect man," she said, caressing his lips with the tips of her fingers. "I can't believe how tight you are. You like your sons deep inside you, Mom," Naruto said boldly. "God, I can't believe how horny I get with the thought of having incest with my son." Kushina screamed as another orgasm exploded within her. "Don't stop, Mom. You feel so good. I am beginning to think my constant need for it is hereditary." Naruto, Are you saying your mother is a nympho? She yelled playfully as she continued slamming her hips on him. Mom, I can help you just like you've helped me. You can have me anytime you want. We'll see about that, baby. I can be awfully needy. However, if we are not careful, this relationship can get wildly out of control. One of us needs to think with our brain here, she said as her eyes rolled back in her head from the pleasure. The two carried on hot and heavy on the large comfortable blanket. Naruto grabbed his mother's bouncing tits still in her bra. He pulled both her tits out a bit further so that her nipples were exposed. He ate and slobbered all over her in soft cleavage. Kushina's cheeks continued to ripple as it beat down on her son's lap. Did you like it when I got rid of your big nasty boner this morning? She asked as she was slightly harder. Her words caused her sons to expand even more. She felt her babies throbbing hard to get bigger and it quickly put on the verge of popping off once again. Watching you gurgle my cum just before you swallow it was the hottest thing I have ever seen. Naruto confessed as he continued eating away at her large motherly tits. Jesus. I am cumming again. Coming so hard, honey. She practically yelled in his face. Between her heart and remembering how she ingested her own son's slimy semen triggered another explosion inside her. The mother's orgasm began to subside but her strong motherly hips never quit. Looking back into her son's eyes, she noticed he was starting to glaze over and his jawline began to tense up tight. Kushina now knew the signs and how her darling's face got when he was about to cum his brains out. That is when Kushina decided to finish him off strong. She pinned him down by his arms above his head and used them as leverage to help increase her pounding. Naruto was helpless as he felt the tip of his heartbeat against his mother's cervix. So you liked releasing those big heavy cum-filled balls for mommy, huh? Do you want me to wake you up every morning and blow you before you start your day? I will have a baby. Mommy was thinking. Those bathing suites in the store today were pretty boring. I was thinking of ordering some string mini tiny bikinis online for our family trip. Would you help me pick some out? Would you like to see me in a micro mesh sling? Perhaps one of those nasty string thongs that would only cover me. Getting even more turned on at the idea of being complete for her son, Kushina continued. Would you be your whore right there on the beach? We can tell your naive father to go get us lunch while you take mommy hard. But you can't rip my bikini off like you did those panties. How would we explain to your father that I'm butt on the beach because our son needed to blow his fat tasty wad up his mother's cunt? Naruto tried to reach his arms up to grab at Kushina's body but she threw them back up above him. Naruto was ready to shoot off really hard. Honey, look at my face. I want you to look into my eyes while you cum your brains out. Kushina slowed her pumping down a bit as Naruto exhaled hard, feeling the need to cum. Kushina masterfully knew how to play both dominant and submissive roles. Naruto looked into his mother's big beautiful purple eyes, hanging on every single one of her nasty words. She had a ton of dirty incestuous scenarios in her filthy mind that she could play out to help edge her darling son. However, she decided to go in for the kill. In the tone that he was so used to hearing almost every day growing up. The same voice that used to say, Naruto, the school bus is here, and, sweetie, dinner is ready. In that exact motherly tone, she looked him deep in his eyes and asked him, baby, would you jerk off on my face? Naruto groaned loud, overpowered Kushina's grip, and grabbed hard onto his mother's bouncing body. He got up into her furiously and released every bit of semen into the womb. He placed one hand around the lower part of her lovely back and another into her hair. He yanked her head back by her wavy red hair and buried his mouth into her sweaty cleavage. Naruto let out a huge, satisfying scream into her jiggling chest as Kushina began to have a head-crushing orgasm as well. Give it to mommy. I want it. I want it. I want it now. Kushina begged as Naruto shot a monster load into her welcoming. Her twat got soaked with his semen as they both came hard together. The mother and son laid on the hillside together, recovering from their latest orgasm. Get up, slugger. We better get home. Your dad might begin to worry. A few hours later, Naruto and his mother finally pulled up to the house and into the driveway. Naruto parked the SUV on the side so he would not block his father from getting out in the morning. Minato just got home from work a few minutes earlier and was already ready for bed. He heard Kushina's car pull up into the driveway but after a few minutes, they still did not come in. Minato didn't think anything of it and went off to bed. I can't believe you're ready to blow again, sweetie. Kushina said as her right hand was a blur over his hard erection. She jacked his hard and extremely fast. She spat on the big bulbous head for more lube and continued. Kushina thought that she just couldn't let him go to bed with any cum left in his young teenage balls. Your teasing made me nuts today. I don't think I am going to go soft for days. Naruto smiled back at her and then back down to her strong hand whacking him off. His thick hard was sticking out of the fly of his cargo shorts as his mother's greasy hand jerked hard. Did you mean all those nasty things you said early while we were having? Or is that just dirty stuff you say, while he said, panting hard, needing one more release for the day? Son, I think we have just scratched the surface. You said it yourself, mommy is just as big of a pervert as you. Were you always like this? Not exactly. I was always a sexual person, but you woke something up inside, honey. But remember, we still have to be very careful. Not everyone would understand what we have together. Mom, I don't want to just be buddies. I love you too much to consider you just like that. That's a sweet Pookie. We can be both, I guess. But if you keep on saying loving things like that, you might just end up making your old mom fall in love with you. She confessed as she leaned in and gave him a deep wet kiss. Kushina completely forgot her own advice on being careful and continued jacking him off while in the driveway. Any one of the neighbors could come out and notice them, including her husband of 20 years. They didn't think about any of that and just kissed each other passionately in the front seat of her car. The middle-aged mom released her grip on her son and pulled away from him. She casually pulled a hair scrunchie out of the glove carpet and started tying her thick full hair into a ponytail. Naruto's heart raced as he sat there extremely hard. His lovely beautiful mother then sat up on her knees in the passenger seat. While arching her back, she sat up tall with great posture. There was a slight pause as they looked at each other with animalistic lust. By one look, she non-verbally told him everything he should do to blow his load. Naruto then reached over and grabbed his mother by her ponytail rather roughly. He guided his mother's head down onto his lap. She engulfed his steel rod into her mouth and began ing on it as hard as she could. Naruto used both hands on her head to pump him faster and faster. A few minutes passed. Spit was flying everywhere as Kushina's deep throat throated her son over and over again. Leaning over the center console, she kept her back arched and stuck her way up in the air. Naruto looked over to her round bubble butt in her jeans. He could not get enough of her body. He reached over with his right hand while his left hand guided her warming mouth up and down on his. Slap, spank, slap, grab, squeeze. Slap, slap. Naruto was going out of control playing with his mother over her tight jeans. Her head continued bobbing extremely fast, sending a copious amount of saliva all over the front of his cargo shorts. He pulled and yanked her extremely tight jeans so that the top of her crack was showing. Minato was now fast asleep, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife was downstairs trying desperately to get their son to blow one more fat sticky load before heading in for the night. Moments later, the naughty mother and son were now in the garage. They hid perfectly behind Minato's large Ford pickup truck, just in case Naruto's father decided to show up unexpectedly. Kushina was on her knees slobbering and blowing him hard, trying to pull every drop of filthy jizz from the bottom of his heavy nuts. She grabbed the back of his pull him in hard as she ed. Gack 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 gack. Kushina's throat made loud wet sounds as she expertly got him off. Shit mom. I am going cum. Kushina jumped to her feet quickly, spun around, put her hands on her thighs, and stuck out her large mommy toward her son. Naruto got the hint and began to jack off while drooling over the thought of coming all over her in her tight jeans. She waited eagerly with her knees together and her perfect wide butt arched towards him. Naruto didn't make her wait long. Naruto bellowed as he sent heavy ropes of cum all over her denim cover. Shoot that gunky cum on me, you nasty boy, she said in a lovely whisper. Thick ribbons of jizz were all over her and began to soak in. Naruto leaned back onto the pickup truck amazed once again at his mother's ability to blow his mind. Kushina looked at her over her shoulder and admired the mess her son made. She walked over to start unloading the car full of shopping bags. Naruto noticed that his mother made no attempt to clean up the large globs of cum that covered her entire denim backside. He followed his beautiful mother around, helping her get everything in. They piled everything on the dining room table. Kushina knew that Naruto loved coming on her as much as inside of her. She felt him staring at her cum-covered jeans and it was obvious that this was turning her on. Kushina decided to walk upstairs, leaving Naruto in the living room with a growing erection. "I'll be back, baby," she said as she went upstairs. After about 30 minutes, Kushina came back down after showering and getting ready for bed. She entered the living room wearing a black satin nightie. The bottom of the nightie came just below her. Her hair slightly wet fell around her shoulders. Her natural beauty caused Naruto to twitch. Removing all makeup, jewelry, and nail polish from her lovely hands and feet, Kushina looked as pure as can be. She walked over slowly and seductively towards her son, grabbing his hand and leading him to stand up. Kushina leaned in and kissed her son passionately. "Stick out your tongue, honey," Kushina said while placing her hands softly on Naruto's shoulders. Naruto slid his tongue past his lips and his mother immediately placed her lips on it. She quickly began eating her son's thick tongue hard. After about 60 seconds of incestuous kissing, Kushina grabbed her son's wrist again and began briskly walking toward the stairs. The bottom of Kushina's lovely round butt cheeks poked out of an extremely short nightie. Naruto couldn't take his eyes off of her mature hips swaying as she slowly walked up the stairs. Kushina and Naruto walked past the bathroom that sat between the master bedroom and Naruto's room. They both heard a sudden snore come from the master bedroom. Ignoring Minato's disgusting snoring, Kushina playfully turned around and jumped on Naruto. Naruto caught her in midair and carried her inside. Over the course of the following week, Naruto and Kushina found themselves needing more and more of each other. The mother and son never felt so close together. The day before Naruto's big birthday party, a few family members were set to come to town and be a part of the festivities. Kushina wrapped up teaching her last spin class for the day. She was creaming her lycra workout pants thinking about what she was planning on getting her son for his big birthday. As she made her way to the women's locker room at the gym, many guys could not help but stare at her as if she was a work of art. Her workout attire hugged every curve perfectly. Kushina secretly loved the stares and gestures, but she never showed it. Especially not to any creeps at the gym. The only man she would allow to touch her was her son. Kushina got home a little while later. She showered and began putting on makeup at her large vanity that sat off in their large bathroom. "Well, I got to run to the airport to get your mom and dad," Minato said to Kushina. "I am going to ask Naruto if he wants to come and drive. He told me he needs to run back to school and pick up his baseball gear." She lied convincingly. "Oh, are you sure? Well, we can swing by the school on the way back." "No, I'll take him." "Oh, okay. I'll be back in about an hour." "Perfect. I love you," Minato said as he grabbed his keys and left. "Love you too," she said as she walked into the living room. About 25 minutes later, Naruto got home from baseball practice and went to his room. "Mom, Dad, are you home?" Naruto yelled as he dropped his equipment down and began taking his clothes off. "In here, sweetie," his mom yelled from her bedroom. Naruto made his way upstairs to his parents' master bedroom. He turned the corner, walked into the room, and saw his former model mother stand next to the big soft bed. "Hey, we have about 2 hours until your father comes home. He ran out to pick up Grandma and Pop," she said as she was putting on a pair of high heels. The shoes made her long milky legs look even more. Naruto's eyes traveled up from his mother's mouth-watering legs to the rest of her goddess body. Kushina stood up and let her polka-dot blue dress flow into place. She was dressed in one of those pin-up 50s-style rockabilly dresses. Her red ruby wavy hair was pulled back in a cute pink headband and she wore a pair of 6 inches heels to match. She turned around towards the mirror and straightened out her dress. "Do you want to help me clean up until your father gets back?" Kushina said while she turned to check out the backside of her dress. "Sure, but I am not sure how much we can get done with you dressed like that." Putting on an expensive pair of stud earrings. "What do you mean?" Kushina loved to play innocent to get her son going. "You like one of those hot Stepford wives, or a Stepford mommy?" Naruto said jokingly, thinking of that movie he watched a few nights ago. Kushina walked out of the room leaving him with a growing rod. Her high heels clicked and clacked on the hardwood floor. Naruto followed closely behind her, watching his mother's ghetto booty sway obscenely left and right. They made their way downstairs when Kushina grabbed Naruto by the arm and sat him down on the couch. The L sectional faced the wall-to-wall entertainment unit that his father built from scratch. Kushina put her hands on her hips and stood tall in front of her son. He was eye level with her sultry hips which flared out and caused her dress to puff out. "What are you doing? No son of mine is going to wear pants while he watches me clean. Take them off right now," she said with authority. Naruto leaned back and slid off his shorts. His extremely thick shot straight up. Kushina picked up a feather duster and began cleaning off the lamp shade, coffee table, etc. This went on for about 10 minutes. Kushina's all-star son, and now straight a student, was going nuts watching her prance around the living room. She continued bending over, getting on her hands and knees, and purposely allowing her dress to ride up so Naruto can get an eyeful. "Oh hun, you are clearly all hot and bothered. Feel free to masturbate while we wait for the family to get here," Kushina said, noticing that his boner was leaking pre-cum without him even touching it. Naruto's right hand gripped him and his left hand played with his large nutsack. She was driving him wild. Another 10 minutes went by and Naruto followed his mother from room to room. He didn't contribute to helping her clean but instead, he kept jerking off. His eyes locked on every curve in her luscious body. She got on her hands and knees and she reached to clean underneath the dining room table. "Shit, I almost forgot." She jumped up, grabbed Naruto's hand, and brought him to the computer room. Her tits bounced up and down as she swiftly walked towards the computer room. She sat him down in the chair in front of the computer and proceeded to sit her down on his lap. "I wanted you to help pick up some real bikinis on Malibu strings," she said as she slowly grinded her into his crotch. Naruto was in heaven. They sat so that they both could look at the computer screen. She popped up a few sling bikinis that left nothing to the imagination. "Imagine my big tits in this baby. I think it would only cover my nipples." She didn't increase her soft bouncing for the next few minutes. She kept the same extremely slow bump and grind. Naruto was breathing hard and he was leaking pre-cum all over the back of her dress. Without diverting her attention from the computer screen, she flipped up her dress and sat her panty covered down on his lap. Kushina let her dress flow down as she opened a few more pictures. "How about this one? I'm not sure if your father would approve," she said, pretending to ignore her son. With her son pinned back, Kushina rubbed her a little bit faster from his balls to the tip of his. "Honey bunny, you're not helping me. You need to focus. Do you need to go release yourself in the bathroom?" "Okay sweetie. If you need to use me as a jack-off toy to drain those nuts, just like mommy no," Kushina said nonchalantly while looking back at the computer. Naruto suddenly lifted her off his lap and carried her out of the computer room in a hurry. Kushina giggled playfully as she was hoisted over his broad shoulders. Moments later, "Use me baby. Use my cunt. Make me scream." Kushina screamed as she was on the receiving end of an extremely hard pounding. Naruto his hot Stepford mother with everything he had. Kushina was bent over the ottoman with her leg together in the living room. Still fully dressed in her polka-dot blue dress, he and her skirt hiked up over her hips. He grabbed her shoulders roughly for added support. His pelvis slapped against her painfully hard. The ottoman jerked forward a bit with every one of his slams. Her pink headband was falling off her head more and more with each hard thrust. Kushina loved being manhandled like this. Naruto loved his mother's soft facial features, so he flipped her on her back. She immediately spread her luscious legs far, still wearing the 6 inches pair of high heels. Like a jackrabbit, Naruto got on top of her and started ramming her fast. Kushina felt him touch the bottom and plow away at her cervix. After all this teasing, she knew he would give her a huge load. "Oh baby, you are mommy so good." Her deep screams filled the living room. While his gorgeous mother had a missionary style, Naruto leaned in close to her face. Kushinan's mouth was slightly open while moaning and breathing heavily. He stared at her full red lips and warm wet tongue in her mouth. She noticed him staring at her as if he was possessed. Possessed by her glowing beauty. It was then that Kushina opened her mouth and stuck out her tongue as far as it would go. Her eyes got round and her facial impressions said, "Please blow your load in my mouth," with one simple look. If anyone has seen one of Ashley Sinclair's tongue-mouth fetish videos, you have an idea of what Kushina's wide-open teasing mouth looked like. She held her mouth open like that for close to a minute while Naruto worked hard. Naruto moaned, "Oh my god," under his breath over and over again while staring down his mother's open throat. Her nasty tongue began to drool saliva down her chin and it was driving him crazy. "Your Stepford mommy," she said innocently. She opened her mouth extra wide again. "Pound, pound, 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 baby, am I a perverted mother?" she asked innocently and stuck out her tongue again. "Pound, pound, pound, pound." Naruto was ready to blow a huge load, but he prolonged it to hear his mother talk dirty to him. He never realized he had a mouth fetish until now. Kushina played up to his newly discovered fetish while keeping her legs spread and mouth opened wide. "Pound, pound, pound, pound. I want to be a cum dumpster for you, son. Only you. Your personal whore. Your incestuous sperm-eating Stepford mommy." Kushina then opened her mouth extremely wide and stuck out her tongue once again. Again, a look that reminded him where she wanted him to shoot his pent-up cum load. "Oh god mom, you're so perfect." Naruto pulled out and shuffled up to his mother's inviting mouth. He quickly laid his head on her warm wet tongue and immediately exploded. Naruto yelled as he drained his balls. Keeping his eyes on the scene directly below him, he watched himself piss stream after stream of jizz into her wide-open mouth. Kushina looked up at him with wickedly lustful eyes. "Stay just like that mom," Naruto said as he continued jacking off really hard, making sure every shot went perfectly in between her full lips. As he finished up his orgasm, he rolled off and laid down next to his mother. Kushina swallowed his heavy deposit, turned her son and stuck out her tongue to show him that there wasn't a drop left. She got up and steadied herself carefully on her high heels. Her legs were a bit weak from the latest session with her beautiful boy. That is when she noticed his son still hard staring up at her. A few minutes later, Kushina was sitting on the dining room table, legs spread, and her arms propping herself up from behind her. Her wavy red hair draped in front of her breathtaking facial features. Naruto with slow steady strokes this time. Her tits bounced up and down to the rhythm of his thrusts. Kushina saw her phone light up next to her. While Naruto pumped away at her tight, juicy, Kushina reached down to reach the text on her phone. The text was from Minato. "They are, about, 15 minutes away." Kushina stumbled heavily due to another approaching orgasm. Naruto didn't say anything as he focused on giving his mother everything. Instead, he lifted her legs onto his shoulders and began ramming her harder. "Oh, baby, that feels amazing," Kushina said as she dropped the phone. Naruto leaned close to her so that his face was inches off her bouncing. Naruto felt his nuts begin to quake and tighten. Kushina lifted Naruto's chin so that she could kiss him. They kissed heavily as Naruto's thrusts got harder, but he didn't quicken his pace. He pulled all the way out to the tip of his big, waited a moment, and slammed back home. Each one of his slams caused Kushina to whimper with pleasure while she continued to kiss him deeply. They hugged each other tightly as their bodies went into automatic. Kushina lovingly kissed and licked his face almost like a cat in heat. Naruto slid himself as deep as he could into his mother's twat and released another gooey load. Not breaking their love-filled kissing, Kushina began tearing from the sheer pleasure of feeling her son's large manly twitch and bust deep inside of her. Trying to shoot as deep as he could, he stayed pressed against Kushina's wet. One last orgasm burst within Kushina. Feeling his mother's body tense up, Naruto stayed balls deep inside her. The next day, the whole family celebrated Naruto's birthday. Kushina prepared a big feast including Naruto's favorite, baked lamb chops. Kushina dressed in a short denim skirt and a tight long-sleeve top. Her tits ballooned out and it was very hard for Naruto to keep his eyes off of her. Every now and again, the lovely mother would give Naruto erotic stares and winks. Naruto knew he had to contain himself and couldn't do anything obvious. Everyone was located on the patio as Kushina began telling the story of when she first brought home Naruto when he was a baby. And he was the cutest baby. He had every nurse in the ward asking if they could keep him. I told them since he just put me through 18 hours of labor, I'll consider it. Mom, don't mom me. In the first couple of weeks, you didn't let your father or I sleep one bit. Everyone laughed and shared their favorite stories of Naruto growing up. A few minutes later, "Hun, can you help me in the kitchen for a second?" Kushina asked Naruto. "Sure," Naruto said as he walked around his Aunt Mito. Kushina and Naruto made their way into the kitchen. She glanced out the window at everyone laughing outside on the patio. Here is the deal. I volunteered to take everyone down to the hotel later tonight. You say you want to come along for the ride. You understand. Alright. But, no buts. Mommy has your birthday gift, but it isn't something I can give you in front of the family. If you know what I mean. What is it? Naruto asked, assuming she would tell him since they were alone. Just plan on not getting much sleep tonight. That's all I am saying, Kushina said confidently as she walked past her son and out the back door. The party lasted well into the evening. Kushina arranged for the extended family to stay at the Hilton downtown. Kushina dear, it's getting late, do you think you could drop us off at the hotel soon? Minato's mom asked while finishing up the last of her wine. Sure mom. Let's go, everyone. Naruto says goodbye to everyone. Kushina yelled for her son to come in from the living room. Usually it would take a miracle to pry Naruto away from playing Xbox, but after hearing his mother's yell, Naruto jumped up eagerly and met everyone outside. Mom, can I come along for the ride? I want to pick up a few things while we are out. Naruto said eagerly. Sure. In fact, you could even drive. I just have to go get my purse. Minato. We'll be back soon. I wouldn't wait until you are tired. Kushina said as she leaned in and gave Minato a kiss on his forehead. A short time later, Kushina and the family arrived at the hotel. Everyone got their stuff out of the truck and they all said their goodbyes. Good night. Now remember, Minato will be here in the morning to take you all to the airport. Kushina said to the bunch. Happy birthday Naruto. Everyone said as they made their way into the hotel. Kushina got into the passenger seat while waving goodbye. Did you have a fun day today baby? Are you kidding mom? Today was the best. That's great honey. Now drive around to the back of the hotel. Why what's the matter? Naruto asked, confused. Just do it. It's only 9 p.m. You still have another 3 hours left for your birthday. Kushina said as she got out a hotel key out of her purse. I told your dad not to wait up. In fact, I bet you that he is sleeping already. Knowing that his day was about to get even better, Naruto quickly drove behind the hotel and found a parking spot. Kushina grabbed her large Under Armour duffel bag that she had in the truck. You planned all of this, didn't you mom? Of course. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't help my son comb his brains out on his own birthday? Kushina said matter-of-factly. Naruto's spine tingled and he began to fill with blood. Kushina even planned so that the family all had rooms on the second floor and she purchased a suite on the top level of the hotel. It was considered the honeymoon suite and had its own separate elevator access with a special key. While in the elevator, the mother and son stood close to each other. Kushina tilted her head and rested it on Naruto's broad shoulder. What's in the bag mom? You'll soon see my big boy. I just hope you like it. Once they reached the top level, Kushina took Naruto's hand and led him to their suite. Once inside, Naruto immediately went out to the balcony to admire the view over the town. Wow mom, you can see the whole town from here. Holy shit, there is a hot tub too. Naruto said with excitement. Only the best for my man. Here, I packed you a pair of dry-fit Nike shorts. Get comfortable. Mommy is going to get changed. Kushina said as she handed him the shorts, and then gave him a soft kiss on the cheek. Naruto watched his mother turn around and walk towards the bathroom. He quickly took off his jeans and boxers. He decided to just wear the shorts without any underwear. His getting hard quickly as he continued staring at his mother walking away. In the bathroom, Kushina analyzed herself in the mirror. I still got it, she said to herself and she did a cute little spin. It had been 18 years since her last paid modeling gig. She made the decision to give it all up so that she could have a family and to become a fitness instructor. She slowly rolled up a pair of white, slightly opaque thigh highs over her long luscious legs. The stockings were trimmed at the top with a little red bow. Kushina reached into her bag and pulled out a fresh new pair of white cotton panty briefs. The white matched her thigh highs perfectly. The back side of the panties gripped and hugged her wonderfully. She continued emptying her bag and sorting out the materials. Naruto was sitting on the bed for what seemed like an eternity to him. He was extremely stiff in his dry-fit shorts. He played around his shorts as he paced around with anticipation. A few more minutes passed as Kushina made sure she was perfectly ready to face her son. For a couple of moments, Kushina looked at herself in the mirror and applied some additional black eyeliner and another coat of red lipstick. She arranged her hair more to match her outfit. To add more eye candy, she lowered her top a bit further and hoisted her tits higher. Her cleavage ballooned and put a tremendous amount of stress on the buttons of her shirt. She was beside herself with desire, lust, and love as she took a deep breath. "Are you ready, baby?" Kushina called out from the bathroom. Naruto's shorts were tenting obscenely as he hopped into the king-size bed. He jumped on the bed and propped himself up against the headboard. Kushina opened the bathroom door and walked out. The 39-year-old mother stepped forward and her son's heart nearly seized up. Kushina was dressed up like a schoolgirl. White thigh-highs, white panties, short red plaid skirt, and a white sleeveless t-shirt tied up showing her perfectly sculpted abs. Not to mention, she even had on red heels to match her skirt and the bows in her hair. Her hair was braided into pigtails as her skirt barely covered her mound. The stockings rode extremely high her legs and stretched perfectly over her muscular juicy thighs. "What do you think? Do you like your schoolgirl mommy?" Kushina said innocently. I. Naruto couldn't form a sentence. "That's what I thought. I knew once you saw your old mother in this, that you would be rock hard," Kushina said with confidence. She noticed his up and down in his shorts. "I took 20 minutes to get ready for you and I see it only takes you seconds to get ready for me." Naruto fished his straining out of his shorts, causing him to sigh with relief. Kushina walked over slowly to the end of the bed. "Gee mister, what's that? Is that for me?" Kushina said in her best innocent schoolgirl voice. Naruto jumped up towards her. His bobbing as he stood up next to his schoolgirl mommy. "Don't hurt me. Please be gentle. Oh, you said a bad word. Daddy said to stay away from bad boys who say bad words. Are you a bad boy?" Naruto reached out and bent Kushina over the end of the bed. Kushina quipped her hands in front of her so that she could keep her balance. Her arched out and her skirt rode up, exposing her white panties. The underwear covered her hole but the material was stretching over her boner-inducing white. Naruto's hands immediately began groping and squeezing. Kushina turned around, jumped onto the bed, and landed on her back. She spread her legs and planted her feet width apart. "What is that? Is that a fun game?" Kushina said, staying in character. Naruto got extremely turned on and dove between her delicious legs. He buried his nose into her white cotton panties. He could smell her musky scent through the underwear and could feel that she was already soaking wet. "Mom, I didn't know you were into role-playing," Naruto said as he pawed at her tiny white briefs. "I didn't know either. But it's fun, right? You can dress your mommy up in anything you want, baby. As long as you give me that of yours." Kushina grabbed her son and flipped him onto his back. She grabbed his protruding at the base so it stood straight up. "Happy birthday, my son," Kushina said warmly. Naruto, filled with lust, grabbed his mother by her pigtails and pushed her head down onto his lap. Kushina began ing hard on Naruto's large throbbing boner. She bobbed her head at a lightning pace, jamming his hard down her throat. Naruto watched in awe. Kushina used her hands to steady herself on his hips as she used only her mouth to deep-throat him. "Your mouth is so warm and wet. I can't believe how good you are at my. This is already the best birthday ever." Kushina quipped her head up off his to catch her breath. An unbroken string of saliva formed from the tip of his and the edge of her mouth. Staring down at him, she watched it bob and pulsate. She dove back down on it quickly, giving another good minute of hard ing. Then she repositioned her body so that she was between his legs looking up at him. Kushina attacked her son's heavy nuts with her tongue while jerking him up and down. Naruto reached again for Kushina pigtails and used them as he guided her head around his soaked groin. He felt her pop his balls in her mouth, hard, and then pop them back out. She repeated this over and over, occasionally lapping her wet tongue from the bottom of the ball sack to the top of his bloated head. With her lips pressed against her son's groin and his lodged deep in her throat, the lovely mother reached down and pulled off her panties. She backed up so that only her mouth was around his head. Then Kushina wrapped the soft cotton panties around Naruto's shaft and jerked him hard. Naruto looked down at his mother dressed in a schoolgirl outfit, completely worshipping him. He knew he wouldn't last that long if he let her continue her attack on his member. However, he couldn't stop her. It felt too good to make her slow down. Mom, you have to slow down or I am going. OGGGGAAAAWWWWDDDDD. Kushina doubled down her assault. Without stopping her hard-ing, she slipped her panties off and handed it to her son while not letting up, bobbing her head from the tip back down to the base. The entire bed rocked as Naruto began moving his hips to meet Kushina's ring. Wetting noises and Naruto's heavy breathing filled the room. Then Naruto brought his mother's panties to his nose and breathed them in. Naruto said into the white boy's short panties. Naruto closed his eyes and every muscle in his body tensed up. Kushina put her hands on Naruto's large ball sack. She gave him a few more hard hits until she felt his balls begin to constrict. At that moment, she dislodged and quickly lifted her head off completely. "Ah, Mom," Naruto said as he needed one more out of her to reach the point of no return. Kushina had her son right on the edge of coming hard, but lifted her mouth off just at the right time. Naruto opened his eyes to see his drooling pre-cum and his busty red-headed mother smiling right back at him. She was breathing hard as drool was running down her chin and down to the top of her cleavage. She was insatiable. "Jesus Mom, I was so close. Why did you stop?" Naruto said, squirming in place. Kushina crawled up on top of her son, lined up her son's enormously engorged with her wet, and slowly slid him all the way down to the base. She sat there for a moment to feel his girth filling her up. It was a feeling like no other. Her 18-year-old son was right back where he belongs. "There you go, sweetie. Just relax. Mommy's here. I don't want to blow your load right away." Still completely dressed in her schoolgirl outfit, Kushina began pumping and gliding her mature hips on top of her big boy. "I want you to build up a nice big juicy cum load for me." "Aw shit," Naruto yelled and grabbed her hips to prevent her from moving. Almost coming again from her nasty dirty talk, he let the feeling subside before continuing as he kept her body from moving. "Don't move, Mom," Naruto said as he gritted his teeth, fighting off the urge to blow his load. "Does Mommy have you all hot and bothered, sweetie?" Kushina giggled as she began bouncing slowly again. Her big round tits were spilling out of her tight top. The knot that tied her shirt under her was holding on for dear life. Kushina grabbed onto her son's shoulders to give him more leverage. The headboard of the bed slammed against the wall for a few minutes. Kushina looked down at her son and began tearing up. She loved that they were so comfortable with their new sexual relationship. "Mom, I love you," Naruto said, staring up at his glowing schoolgirl mommy. Kushina leaned in and passionately French kissed her son while rocking her hips back and forth. This lasted for a few minutes until Kushina's whole body began to quake. She grinded herself faster and faster. Kushina whispered with mouth pressed right against Naruto's lips. For a good minute, Kushina's orgasm caused her to gush all over Naruto's, then she began to slow down so that she could feel every inch of her baby boy's. "Wow honey. But, now that I have you really hard, my lovely stud, I have another present for you." Kushina lifted her body off her son and Naruto's wet slapped hard against his stomach. He stared at her skirt that barely reached the bottom of her round, plump cheeks. She walked to the bathroom and came back with a bottle of baby oil. She turned around so that her bubble butt was facing him and she lifted the plaid skirt to the top of her hips. She poured a great amount of baby oil all over her cheeks and in her deep crack. Naruto grabbed him and slowly stroked at the site in front of him. "Mom." Kushina hopped back onto the bed but laid down on her stomach and put a pillow underneath her hips. She slowly lifted just her hips and in the air while keeping her tits and upper body down on the bed. Her fleshy round glistened in the bedroom light. She said as wiggled her heart-shaped bottom at him. "Are you serious, Mom?" Naruto said as he jumped up and began to feel her lower back and oily meat. He pulled apart her cheeks and began fingering. "I never thought you would go for it. Oh my god, you look so good," Naruto said as he dove into her and began to lick away at her tiny. "I just figured this would be another way for you to get all your nasty urges out of your system. A guy like you needs to be with a woman that allows him access to all of her dirty holes," Kushina said with a smirk. "Naruto, look at the time, it's 10:47 p.m. Kushina said surprisingly. Naruto lifted his head out of his mother's oil-slicked backside. "Exactly 19 years ago to the minute, you were born, baby. Happy birthday, baby," she said as she turned her head towards her only child. "Here is my way of saying thank you, Mommy." Naruto said jokingly. Naruto moved up and mounted his mom with her arched high in the air. He used his right hand to angle his downwards and into his mother's sloppy cunt. He immediately laid down on her back as the weight of his muscular body caused her body to lay flat. OMMMMYYYYYGG Gua DDDDD. Kushina quailed as Naruto sank as deep as he could go. I love you so much, Mom. Thank you so much for the best birthday ever. Naruto began his mother as hard as he could. He slammed his groin into her backside and dug in. Come again for me, Mom. You deserve it. Women like you need to be treated like the beautiful goddesses that you are. Kushina's mouth hung open as her body was being used like a ragdoll. I need you to come for me, Mom. Quote. Kushina yelled as another orgasm approached quickly. You like it hard, Mommy. Come for me. Your body belongs to me tonight. Naruto said confidently. Not just tonight, honey. Forever and always. Kushina screamed as she felt herself explode. She buried her face into the pillow and screamed again. Then Kushina began to squirt all over the bed and Naruto's. Naruto slid his out of her squirting and slapped her hard. He then pressed his bloated head against his. With the combination of juice, oil, and animal lust, Naruto was able to ease right down to the root of her butt. Kushina let out a deep grunt, turned her head, and looked at her son. Christ, Naruto. Oh. Kushina yelled as she felt him beginning to pump his in and out of her warm. Naruto yelled and had to stop moving because he felt himself beginning to come. His mother squeezed his hard rod like a vice grip. The pleasure was so intense that any movement at all would have made him shoot his balls. He slammed his fist down on the bed and breathed hard. He rested his forehead on the back of his mother's head. The smell of her hair instantly transported him to when he was a young kid. Her scent and voice gave him a nostalgic reaction. Slowly Naruto started to drill Kushina's again. He reached over to the bottle of baby oil and squirted about a quarter of the bottle all over her, upper legs, and lower back. The oil was soaking into her thigh-highs and school skirt. Do it, baby. Kushina whimpered loudly. Naruto his mother's harder and harder as the bed continued to shake faster and faster. Pound, 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 pound. Kushina's flesh rippled as Naruto's hips smashed into her. He glided in and out really fast, thanks to the generous helping of baby oil and juice. The hotel room was quickly converting into a scene that you only find in the dirtiest porno movies. Jesus Christ, baby. Don't stop. Kushina yelled as she came hard. Her body went into a violent convulsion. Mom, I've been so horny all day. I don't think I am going to last much longer. You are so tight. Honey, let me up. I want to make you explode with my mouth and tits. You mean with your whore's mouth and tits? Naruto said confidently as he put a thumb along her red lips. Kushina began to touch her son's thumb. Do you think you can give your mommy every drop? Kushina asked innocently. Kushina untied the knot in her white schoolgirl top and her perfect round E-cup tits hung beautifully. Her entire body was covered in oil except for her tits, so she used her hands to spread the slick goo all over her thick chest. Naruto sat on the edge of the bed with his head pointing towards the ceiling, as Kushina got on her knees. She scooted forward, grabbed a hold of her tits in her wet hands, and engulfed Naruto's hard between them. Let your mother milk you properly. My tits are your playground right now, sweetie. Kushina said while bouncing her tits at an ungodly speed. Naruto said, breathing rapidly. You like when I jack you off with my big mommy tits. Dressed as your naughty schoolgirl, slamming her big down on your hard boner. Maybe I should dress up for you more often. Maybe a naughty sperm clinic nurse. You can give your nurse your thick creamy samples. How about your whore cheerleader? Me up my naughty uniform while I hold onto a pair of pom-poms. Kushina said in the most seductive voice imaginable. Naruto felt like he was going to pass out from pleasure. Kushina tightened her grip around Naruto's hard, focusing on the tip of the sensitive. All of a sudden, Naruto reached up and grabbed his mother by the back of her head and pushed her face down on his forcefully. She gladly opened her mouth and allowed Naruto to her face as needed. Gak, 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 gak. Kushina's head flew up and down at lightning speed. Naruto was clearly using her mouth to jack off. Her hands quickly went to the top of Naruto's thick thighs to secure herself from falling forward. He grabbed her long pigtails and let out a deep primal groan. I'm CUMMMMMINNNGGGGGMOOOOMMM. Naruto almost cried. Kushina shot her face up off Naruto's and looked at him with the dirtiest look she could muster up. "Beat off on my face, baby," Kushina yelled as she sat back on her heels. Naruto's hand quickly grabbed him and began jacking off hard and fast. His fist flew up and down and he rubbed in his mother's saliva and baby oil. Kushina tilted her head back and stayed perfectly still. Her son stood up tall and aimed his at her, and stared down at her beautiful face. The combination of her outfit, dirty talk, and the devilish look in her eyes sealed the deal, and he exploded hard. The force of Naruto's first shot of cum was so hard that it hit Kushina's forehead and almost bounced back and hit him on the leg. Naruto unloaded all the contents of his balls on his mother's perfect face. 4, 5, 6, and then 7 large heavy ropes of jizz shot out and landed all over her face. Quickly, there was not a dry spot on Kushina's smiling face. She stayed perfectly still, never flinching or closing her eyes. She lived to watch her son's face as he blasted his nuts. "Jesus, Mom. I don't think I've cum so hard in my life," Naruto said as he finished jerking out a few last drops onto his mother's face. "Wow, honey. You really had a lot of cum backed up in there." Naruto exhaled loudly and fell back onto the bed. Kushina got up and went to the bathroom. She stared at herself in the mirror and saw a loving mother who clearly would do anything for her son. The sight of thick white ropes of cum lined on her face was so arousing. The watery parts of his load dripped down to her big matronly tits, neck and shoulders. She began swooping the cum off her tits and putting the globs of sperm in her mouth. Not realizing she didn't close the door behind her, she continued to scoop the larger patches. Naruto stood in the door of the bathroom, staring at his mother eating the cum that he just shot all over her. He began jerking at his semi-hard as he continued to watch. Her legs looked beautiful, soaked in baby oil in her 6 inches heels. Kushina noticed Naruto staring at her in the bathroom mirror. For a second, she was embarrassed to be caught scooping her son's cum into her mouth, but she quickly started getting even more aroused. She smiled devilishly at her son through the slimy cum that was still pasted on her face. Naruto raced up behind his naughty mother and roughly bent her over the sink. He flipped up the oil-soaked schoolgirl skirt and slid his large growing right into her round. Kushina yelped loudly and grabbed the edge of the sink for support. Kushina almost exploded right there. Naruto forced his in and out slowly as he watched her face in the bathroom mirror. "Mom, keep doing what you were doing. Keep eating my cum," Naruto said as he pumped his mother's tight. The sight before him made him rock hard in seconds. Kushina shivered a bit as she felt her son slowly sink his balls deep in her glorious butt. She took her large right and brought it up to her mouth. She then began scraping the droplets of cum off her tits with her long lovely tongue. Before swallowing, she would stick out her tongue far so that he could see how dirty she could be. Suddenly Naruto began his perfect mother hard and fast. Kushina looked at herself in the mirror as she was getting railed. Her hair and tits bounced in unison while the rest of the sticky cum that was on her face began to fly all over the place. "Why do you say we take this to the hot tub, my lovely birthday boy?" Kushina said after she swallowed another mouthful. Minutes later, Kushina was riding her son hard as jets of the hot tub were bubbling away. Over the next hour, the hot mother and strong son were all over the hotel suite. On the bed and completely drained, Kushina leaned in and kissed Naruto softly on his cheek. "Are you excited to go to Disneyland next week?" Kushina asked as she traced her hand over his six-pack abs with her finger. "You bet. Are we going to be able to, have time together alone?" Naruto asked. "Oh, I think we will find ways to get rid of your father when needed," Kushina replied as her hand found its way down to Naruto's nutsack. She seductively dragged her fingernails across the skin. "Good," Naruto said, smiling from ear to ear. "We should think about getting home. You came hard 2 times tonight, baby. Is my little Epis satisfied? Maybe one more before we go to my Jocasta-like goddess?" Naruto asked while giving him a few tugs. Clearly, he didn't want the night to end. "Jesus, baby. I can't believe how horny you are. My andare kind of sore thanks to you," she said as she engulfed him in her wet mouth. Kushina dragged her tongue all over his head and then spent extra time licking away at his used balls. "Tell me when you're going to bust again, baby," Kushina said right before she led Naruto's testicles back into her mouth. When Naruto got close to coming, Kushina quickly sat up on her knees between his legs. She leaned her head down so she hovered over his steel. Kushina shifted her beautiful red hair so it all draped down the right side of her face. This causes her long hair to engulf her son's. Naruto's eyes shot up when his mother grabbed him with her hair around it. "Come in my hair, sweetie. Blow that sticky stuff in my hair," Kushina said as her jerking hand beat his hair covered. Kushina had a perverted yet wild look in her eyes. Naruto lasted about 10 firm pumps and blasted. He shivered and shook hard as his third load of the night released. He was extra sensitive and winced hard when she dragged his spewing head through her flowing hair. The hair around Kushina's hand gunked up quickly. "I told you, baby. Mommy is your cum dump." Naruto looked up at the ceiling and let out one last satisfying groan.